Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the House Appropriations Committee Transportation and Environment Subcommittee hearing on the following agency budgets. And when I read these budgets, this is the order in which you will appear. The Department of Environment, Maryland Energy Administration, Maryland Environmental Service, MDOT Secretary's Office, MDOT Motor Vehicle Administration. So we will begin with Andrew Gray, the Budget Analyst for the Department of Environment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll now present the Maryland Department of the Environment's fiscal 2027 operating budget analysis. On page 1, you see there the fiscal 2027 budget increases $21.6 million, or 8.7% to $269.7 million. Jumping right into the Managing for Results exhibits on page 9, Exhibit 1 reflects the air pollutant trends relative to air quality standards. It's a busy graph. Point here is to look at that 0% line. If the line is underneath that, color lines underneath that, that's a good thing. The only standard we're not currently meeting is the ozone 8-hour standard, which we did meet back in 2022, and looks like hopefully we'll be meeting again soon. One thing to note here, there's a new standard for the annual particulate matter, 2.5 microns, and the agency has recalibrated its older information to reflect that new, more tight standard, which means that we're going from that dotted line to the line above it. Still meeting the standard, but it's more strict. Blood lead, childhood blood lead is discussed on page 10 and exhibits on page 11, exhibit 2. What you're seeing here is the number of children tested goes down between 112,000 or so to 110,000 between calendar 22 and 23. And the number of kids who are tested at higher lead levels increases between 22 and 23. This data is older now. Calendar 2024 data would have been expected to come out in the fall of 2025, but we did not actually see that data. MDE should comment to why that information has not been posted and why the child blood level improvement trends appear to have leveled off. Moving now to the information about Public Information Act and permit data, Exhibit 3 on page 13. So what you're seeing here is we do not have new data on the percent of PIA responses issued within 30 days and permits processed within applicable standard time, because MDE is no longer reporting that information. We have historical information here. One thing to note is that there is a substantial change in the permits issued information. So if you look at the blue line, it's at a much higher level than, or the blue bar, is much higher than the red line, which is the new data. Therefore, DLS asks MDE to comment on why there is such a big change between the measures between the years, and also why it's no longer reporting those two measures that were just discussed. Moving now to the federal rescissions on page 14. There was a reduction of about $731,000 for the Environmental Protection Agency's $1 million Environmental Justice Government-to-Government Program funding. So that was funding that was passed-through funding to the Chesapeake Bay Trust. There's a minimal impact to the Maryland Department of the Environment, mostly to overhead costs, but Chesapeake Bay Trust does lose out on a significant amount of money in terms of how much they'll be able to spend. In terms of the status of legislative additions, there's a $250,000 general fund addition in fiscal 2025, or it's fiscal 2026, excuse me, for the city of Hagerstown to fund a long-range water and wastewater infrastructure needs study. So apparently the MOU has been signed. DLS recommends that MDE comment on the current status of that study. On the bottom page 14 is the proposed deficiencies. $4.2 million in federal funds for the Clean Pollution Reduction Grants funding. We'll talk a little bit more about that as an issue later in the analysis. Moving now to the Exhibit 4 on page 15 concerns the overview of agency spending. And the largest portion of the agency's budget is the Water and Science Administration, largely due to funding for regular positions and then also grant funding. And then the Emergency and Support Services, which is formerly coordinating offices, also has a fairly large amount of money for personnel, but mostly it's $28 million for debt service on the Bay Restoration Fund revenue bonds. Moving now to the proposed budget on page 18, Exhibit 5. The employee and retiree health insurance goes up by $4.8 million, $2.5 million increase for salary adjustments, but overall, there's actually a $1.6 million decrease in personnel costs because of that miscellaneous adjustments of around $8 million. So in prior years, miscellaneous adjustments was sort of a holding place for budget amendments that were going to occur during that year. And then the money would be allocated out to the proper objects, and then you could do a proper year-over-year comparison. What happened, though, is in the BRFA of 2025, Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act, all the fee revenue increases were budgeted in this particular sub-object. And that money should have then been allocated across the agency in terms of where the revenues are actually going to be spent, but it has not been allocated out. Therefore, DLS recommends that MDE comment on or look at kind of addressing that issue and explaining exactly where that money should be going to kind of true up the comparison between the 2 years. In terms of the other large changes, $11.1 million for the wastewater treatment plant operations and maintenance funding, that's double budgeted. DLS recommends reducing that funding. And there's a $7.0 million climate pollution reduction grants increase, and once again, we'll talk a little bit more about that as an issue. Moving now to the Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act provisions and policy legislation that have implications for MDE's budget on the bottom of page 20. So the first component there is the Strategic Energy Investment Fund funding. This money is being expanded to include the funding for an MDE position. This is the Senior Climate Advisor position. So the position is still an MDE, already there. Instead of being funded with general funds, it'll be funded by special funds from the Strategic Energy Investment Fund based on this particular provision. And then there's a reduction of general funds and special fund appropriation contingent on that provision in the budget. Policy legislation is Senate Bill 108, House Bill 250, which authorizes MDE to impose an administrative penalty for a violation of provisions relating to use of waters, reservoirs, and dams. So the fiscal 27 budget includes a $250,000 general fund reduction and $250,000 special fund appropriation contingent on that provision. Personnel data begins on page 21. Note here that the Board of Public Works approved the abolition of 502.7 positions, October of 2025. MDE's component of that was 30 positions, of which 17 were vacant and 13 were related to the voluntary separation program. MDE's fiscal 2027 allowance reflects a decrease of 1 regular position and an increase of 4 contractual FTEs. The abolished position, it was when the Water and Science Administration. My understanding is that that position has, a person has been promoted to a new position, and now they're not going to backfill. That position will then be deleted. There's also contractual increase of 4.0 in the Air and Radiation Administration, primarily to help with the large influx of climate pollution reduction grants funding as discussed. MDE budget turnover increases from 7.44% in the fiscal 2026 working appropriation to 8.3% or so in the fiscal 27 allowance. First issue concerns the greenhouse gas spending. It's on page 22. So big picture wise, the state has committed to 60% reductions from greenhouse gas emissions from calendar 2006 levels by calendar 2031. Big costs associated with this. The most recent report reflects a potentially $1 billion annually additional funding from the public resources for that purpose. Exhibit 6 shows how we're actually spending our current climate change or greenhouse gas reduction funding. Largely, money is being reflected as 88% from the Maryland Department of Transportation. However, this funding does not correlate or has not been shown to correlate with any greenhouse gas reductions or any kind of climate change benefits. Therefore, MD should comment on how that spending informs its overall state prioritization of climate change mitigation spending, whether climate change outcomes could be correlated with actual spending, and whether there's been any consideration of using a tagging mechanism to better track climate-related expenditures in the state budget. Issue 2 begins on page 24. This is concerning a greenhouse emissions total cost return study. So it was passed as bills chapter 2 and 12 of 2025. The governor did a veto those bills. The legislature overrode those bills, his veto, excuse me. There's $100,000 in general funds that was programmed or at least noted in the fiscal note for the bills as being needed. DLS recommends MD comment where that $100,000 in general funds is budgeted for the study. And kind of basically, what is the plan going forward since you lost half a year in terms of being able to complete that study because of the veto of the bill? Issue number 3 concerns federal climate pollution reduction grants funding. So this is what we talked about, the $11 million in fiscal 27, and then the $4.2 million in fiscal 2026 deficiency. So one of the concerns that DLS has here is that it's a substantial amount of money, but we didn't understand exactly how the money was being allocated between the different programs. So Maryland Department of the Environment, Maryland Department of Agriculture, Department of Natural Resources, and recent information indicates also the Maryland Port Administration as well, which will be reflected more as an issue in the Department of Natural Resources budget. So that lack of clarity made it difficult to understand kind of what the overall scope was, how the funding was going to be used, when it was going to be coming into the state's budget, how many years we're going to be receiving it. DLS recommends that MDE coordinate with the agencies on a kind of response to that, which they have done in terms of that overall funding amount, and to talk about the funding relationship with the Atlantic Conservation Coalition and the Clean Corridor Coalition, the two main coalitions of which providing the funding from the federal government to us. So that's $133.1 million in total. And the funding used by agency in year, metrics, and any other relevant information to help understand that funding. And perhaps to discuss also whether there's any concern due to the repeal of the endangerment finding underpinning greenhouse gas reductions under the Clean Air Act. The understanding is that this funding has been granted and has been allocated, but the question is, does that federal government action have any implications for this funding? Fourth issue concerns the building energy performance standards. So part of the greenhouse gas reduction portfolio is to have these particular standards. Language in the fiscal 2025 budget bill restricted funding until submission of information that was not available until the end of fiscal 2026. Therefore, that report could not be submitted. Subsequently, Chapter 844 of 2025 did authorize a $100 annual reporting fee for MDE, which is great because that brings more money in, obviously, to support that program. However, there are additional costs that don't appear to be budgeted in positions in MDE's budget. For instance, the additional positions noted in the fiscal note for Chapter 844, reflecting positions both needed for the bill itself and then additional positions on top of that, which do not appear to be in MDE's fiscal 2027 allowance. DLS recommends that a committee narrative be adopted to complete that reporting requirement concerning the building energy performance standards due to the fact that the information should be available at the end of fiscal 2026. And also recommends that MDE comment on how it's administering the building energy performance standards program, establishing an online reporting system without additional funding and positions necessarily for that purpose. The bottom of page 26, the final issue here is the Maryland Department of the Environment's fee increase revenue. So we discussed that a little bit before. The miscellaneous adjustment sub-object has all that money in it and has not been allocated out to the program. So we can't see exactly how that money is being allocated in fiscal 26 versus fiscal 2027. The other concern, as shown on page 28, is that the revenue and closing balance information for the funds that would receive that money has been drastically inflated. And there's no way then to say how much these smaller increment changes in fee revenues that we're expecting to receive are actually being realized in the agency's special funds and then being budgeted. That's obviously a concern because we want to understand more about what that fee revenue means for the agency's overall operations. So DLS recommends MD comment on why the fiscal 25, 26, and 7 revenues are so much greater than the estimated revenues for chapters 604, chapter 432, and chapter 844 of 2025. The likelihood of the fiscal 2027 estimated closing balances being realized and the overall experience with the new revenues generated, including how that would help expand or stabilize existing programs. Moving now to page 29 is the operating budget recommended actions. The first one is to delete double budgeted operating and maintenance grants funding for wastewater treatment plants. It's $11.1 million special fund reduction. That money is in the budget already. This reduction would just true up the budget. Energy use intensity costs and alternatives reporting is the other component here. That's the committee narrative that would then fulfill that original reporting requirement for which funding was restricted in previous years, but the money didn't provide for a report because the data wasn't available. Unless there are any questions, that concludes the presentation.
Thank you. That was very extensive. We appreciate your work on it, Mr. Gray. And now we have Secretary McElwain and whoever else you have with you would like to approach.
Thank you.
And you may begin your response when you're ready and introduce your panel, please.
Thank you. I brought the entire agency with me. Just kidding. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. It's good to see all of you this afternoon. For the record, I am Serena McElwain, Secretary of Maryland's Department of the Environment. With me, I have Chia Cook, who is the Business Operations Director, like the COO of MDE. We have Lee Carey, the Water and Science Director, Chris Hoagland, the Air Director, and we have Rick Kessler, who is the Land and Materials Director. All here in case there are questions that you may have that I may not have the answer to, very likely, which is why I have the SMEs here with me. So I am here today to present the governor's fiscal year 2027 operating budget. The request is $270 million, which is $22 million over 2026. Our budget proposal reflects disciplined fiscal management, stable staffing, and targeted investments in our core environmental and public health responsibilities. I want to talk a little bit about fiscal discipline. We continue to rely less on general funds and more on federal and special funds to pay for our regulatory services, to provide the services that we're providing Marylanders. And we continue to identify savings in our operations. For example, we decreased our personnel costs by approximately $1.6 million, and we did that by improving the operational efficiencies throughout our agency and managing our vacancies as well. Through the voluntary separation program and eliminating vacancies, we were able to abolish 30 vacant positions, and we achieved approximately $2.6 million in annual savings. So we are keeping our staffing stable, but at the same time, we are improving our operational efficiency. When we think about performance, operational performance, we are modernizing and improving the services throughout MDE for all the services that we're delivering. And I'll give you just a few examples. In terms of our permit turnaround, we have reduced the permit turnaround by 25% since 2022, we have cleared 94% of the original wastewater permit backlog. We have reduced the permit renewal backlogs by half. We expect the remaining routine inspection backlogs for water and wastewater to be resolved by the end of this calendar year. Internal technology modernization, we have done a lot in that area. We've saved over $100,000 just through automating the grants and loan systems at MDE. And we've done much more, but that's just a small example of all the IT changes and automation that we've done. So we're doing all of these things so that we can improve transparency, accountability, and obviously the regulatory consistency that we have throughout the program. For Conowingo Dam, I do want to just mention again that we finalized a $341 million agreement. And we also finalizes the 50-year water quality certification for Conowingo Dam. You all know that this settlement has been pending for years, so I'm very proud that we finally got it done. We are anticipating the final federal licensing actions, which is to be done by FERC. That should be done by really in a couple of months. And so I just want to add that this historic agreement is really something to be proud of, because we have been caught up in litigation for years, and now we can finally go toward long-term environmental investment with a lot more money than we started off with. Back River has really improved. The wastewater treatment plant there is in compliance with its consent decree, and the pollution levels are down by 60% from 4 years ago. We continue to provide the oversight. I'm often asked, are we still providing the oversight that we used to do when we did have problems? We are there. We continue to work very closely with Baltimore. We continue with community engagement. Data transparency is something that we really ensure that we keep to a high level. Although, yes, there is still some work to be completed in that area, but operational stability and regulatory compliance has really significantly improved. And again, that's something to be proud of. Regarding lead service lines, they are obviously an area of importance for us. We have inventoried nearly all of the reported service lines. There is, we have a remaining challenge, which is to verify the lines. We call those the ones that continue to need to be verified as unknown, but the utilities are on point. They are required to have all of those, all the verification completed by 2027. We don't see a problem with that at all. Regarding the federal environment, I think we all know the landscape and the funding commitments have changed. And I think in that area, we're doing really well. The federal funding remains to be essential for the programs that we have at MDE, so I don't have a real problem with the federal funding that we anticipate coming in. We do have certain grant programs that experience some uncertainty and some delay, but we have worked to minimize operational disruption so that we can continue to provide all the services that we need to protect our core services. And in closing, I'll just say, overall, our budget reflects stable staffing, reduced general fund pressure, as I spoke about earlier, operational efficiencies. We are doing a lot in that area. We have strong enforcement and compliance performance, and our strategic federal funding is deployed in a way that makes a lot of sense for everybody. So we're maintaining our environmental progress while we're operating with fiscal constraints, and that is the end of my testimony, and I'm open for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Secretary. Do we have any questions from the committee? Delegate Spiegel, please, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Secretary, to all your team. Thank you very much for being here and the work you do. I wanted to ask about greenhouse gas emissions reductions and the spending analysis conversation. I am interested in better understanding how we can, moving forward, track our spending as part of the core mission to try to reduce greenhouse gas emissions as a relative per dollar cost. We have all these different programs and all these different grants that we give out to good causes in an effort to try to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But my understanding from the response from the agency on this issue is that looking backwards, there hasn't really been a good way to track what is the return on investment per dollar for different types of investments that we are making to try to do this. And that's understandable. I mean, this is a science that can sometimes be difficult to measure the financial, impact as well as the environmental impact of various types of investments. And there are also what we call co-benefits of these types of investments, right? You may be reducing greenhouse gas by investing in transit-oriented development, and you're also gaining other types of benefits for the public by those investments. But it's also my understanding from your response to the DLS report that there is an effort underway, or that there could be an effort underway going forward in your work with DBM to try to better track or tag these different expenditures that the agency is making with respect to greenhouse gas emissions reduction, so that we going forward can maybe have a better idea of the per dollar value of different programs. If there's one program where we're spending a lot of money but only getting a small reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, and another where we're only spending a little bit of money but we're getting a lot of bang for our buck in return of in terms of those emissions reductions, I'd like to understand that, if it's at all possible, to get metrics that will tell us that. So I wanted to ask you about sort of where the agency is on that and whether you see that as a possibility going forward.
Yeah, so thank you for that question. I think your final question is, do I see a way forward in providing the metrics that you feel are necessary to put toward the information that we have in that annual report? Is that the final answer you would like?
Yeah.
Because I can go through the other, I mean, we provided an answer, but I do want Director Hoagland to answer parts of your question specifically. But yes, metrics are important. And we're going to do everything that we can to ensure that we are showing the return on investment for the investments that we're making. It is difficult because there's so much funding in so many different areas. But certainly, I'm a metrics person, so I appreciate what you just said, and we'll make sure that we do everything that we can to include that. But can you answer specifically the questions about the greenhouse gas tracking that we're doing and how it relates to the cost?
Yep. Thank you, happy to, and thank you for the question, Delegate Chris Hoagland, Director of the AIR Program at MDE. And so this report in question we're getting better every year. It's a relatively new report. And so we've been, thanks to this report, building in more tracking of the investments that didn't exist before. So when we started out with this report for the first time, we were having to go after the fact and try to figure out what money had been spent for different purposes. Now that we've done it for a couple of years, we're starting to build in this more proactive tracking so that we know as we spend money, what's being invested in these relevant categories. And so I think we can continue to build on that over time. I don't think we could promise that we could start developing performance metrics in terms of tons reduced per program in next year's report, but I think it's something that we can build toward as we get the tracking systems in place to get more effective at this report over time.
Thank you.
Other questions from the committee? Delegate Edelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Great to see you all. Great to be here. I wanted to ask you about BEPS. I appreciated the response that you provide, but I'm still not sure I totally understand the current plan to both hire the requisite personnel and do the necessary work to fully implement BEPS. And so I was hoping that you could just put a little bit more meat on the bone for us on that as to the agency's plan. When are we going to bring in the personnel? I know you said you're waiting on the data that will be available in June of this year, but it feels a little bit like we're sort of waiting and seeing, and I was hoping we could have a little bit more intensity on that and a bit more specific of a plan.
Of a plan to add more employees and FTEs pins to the BEPS program?
Yeah, and to really, I understand the challenges with the budget bill language that we had that expired, but I know you're still trying to work in the spirit of the language, and so I just wanted to get a sense of kind of what is really the agency's plan to be able to implement that.
Okay, thank you for that question. And Chris, of course, I'm going to turn that over to you. I do know that we have 3 positions right now. We were budgeted for more, but we are moving people around in the agency to make sure that we are making sure that that program is still moving and that we're still implementing. We do have a challenge with the FTEs, but Chris, why don't you talk about where we are with the specific staffing and the plan to make sure we're able to implement the way we're supposed to.
Certainly happy to. And so we're phasing in work over time. Legislation passed last year, changed the BEPS program, added a study task. In order to meet those requirements, we're taking them one at a time. So this year we are focused on enrolling buildings in the program to get the program going. We are in the first reporting cycle right now. While we're also focusing on performing the study, which is due at the end of this year. After the study, next year we are planning a rulemaking to update the program with new provisions from the legislation last year, as well as some other provisions that we've been waiting to have the information to implement. And then after we've performed that rulemaking, we can move to the next phase of implementation. So I guess the short answer for how we're handling things right now is that we're phasing them in over time. We have seen some good progress building the program. More than 6,000 buildings have participated already in the first reporting cycle, and we're continuing to enroll others in this first year where we're building the program. If I could speak to the study and the budget language, so there was the language in the fiscal 25 budget that created some analytical tasks for the department. In the legislation that subsequently passed last session, House Bill 49, that created a new study task that is due at the end of this year that includes that same information. So we have a contract in place for the study. We're working on the study, and so we'll be able to deliver it by the end of this year. And that should answer the questions that were in the analytical tasks in the budget language of fiscal 25 budget.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Delegate Harrison.
Thank you. I have one question regarding the blood lead report. And I know in your response you said that it was delayed because of something going on at the CDC and that it would be May 21st. But you had an audit finding that talked about you didn't have a sufficient process to ensure owners of affected lead paint properties had required inspection certificates. Will your report address that in ensuring, talking about making sure that the owners of those properties have the proper certificates? Will that be included in your report that is expected in May?
No, that's not included in that report. But I do have Rick Kessler here to talk about it. We're still, the audit finding that you're referring to is the recent one from OLA? Okay, so we're addressing those issues now and responding to what's correct and what isn't correct. But let me just talk really, if I can have Rick just talk quickly about the report that you're speaking of in July, please.
Thank you. Rick Kessler, I'm the Director of the Land and Materials Administration. Yeah, that report relates to blood lead levels. It's surveillance of children who have been poisoned, so it's a different report. It was delayed in large part because, well, basically the CDC program was dismantled for about 3 months last year between April 1st and June. And that's where we are dependent on our information from and coordinate with. With regard to the findings you're talking about, we are working on those. We take them very seriously. We recently spent a lot of time. It's a new finding. I'm not sure we agree with everything, but we can always do better, and we will have new procedures to try and do better than we have been.
Yeah, because this was from August of 2022. And
Oh, I'm sorry. Are you talking?
this report that I'm looking at
Okay.
is from August of 2022.
That is a computer, so that's an issue between two computer databases that we use. That not working together. And we are actually spending that money right now. We've been using people, human resources. It's a lot of records to do that. And we are getting, thanks to the Secretary, we are getting the money put into getting those databases reconciled, and we expect to have that in the next 6 months, I believe you said.
Yes, that's right. It is a data integration problem where they weren't really looking and communicating. It was small issues like apartment instead of unit.
Yeah.
Those were, so it's just a matter of reconciling, but it wasn't actually an indication that there was a problem in a lot of cases. It was just the system itself wasn't speaking, but we are rectifying that issue right now.
So then with the issue with the CDC, that has been rectified. And
Yeah,
so
yes, ma'am.
all of that will be reflected, because I guess I kind of see them working hand in hand, honestly. We need to know what's going on with our children.
Yes.
But the owners of those properties that have that, we need to know who they are.
Right.
And because we don't want there to be more problems with our children. So I just kind of see them working hand in hand, and that's why I brought it up.
Yeah.
But I just want to make sure that, one, we don't have a repeat finding, because we see too many repeat findings. And then two, just to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to make sure that our children are safe. And if we're putting the money in for these programs, we need to make sure that it's actually being used appropriately.
That is our number one priority, our children, our families. So believe me, we are looking at it so in such a detailed matter. I am putting resources over to those areas, particularly the systems. Again, our number one priority is protecting our children. There are issues with the system, but we still have a manual process where we're making sure that nothing is falling through the cracks at MDE. So I'm on it, my team is on it, and I appreciate you caring just the way I care and we care. So thank you.
Thank you.
One last question, and then we're going to move to oral testimony, starting with Matt Stegman. But the last question has to do with Exhibit 7, which was in the legislative analysis that shows a discrepancy between revenue projections and what has been realized. And in your response, in the MDE response, it says that DLS may not have the correct data and that MDE will work with the Department of Budget Management to remedy this issue. Has that been completed?
I'm going to turn it over to Chia to respond to that piece.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. Chia Cook, the Director of Business Operations for MDE. This information was just brought to our attention, so we're coordinating those efforts as we speak.
Okay, is it possible for us to get that information back from you within
Absolutely.
the, whatever time frame we normally, what is it, 10 days?
Absolutely.
Okay, so what we're looking for between you and the Department of Legislative Services is a revised Exhibit 7 that matches your data.
Okay, we can do that.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. We appreciate all of you being here today. We have a rather packed schedule, so you got off a little bit light. I hope you're happy about that.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, Delegate Spiegel has a question.
Oh. I knew this was too good to be true. Go ahead.
You may have jinxed them, Madam Chair. I don't want to push this too far because I know we have a packed schedule today, but I just wanted to ask a couple very specific questions about some accounting items, if I might. So the analyst talked about this miscellaneous adjustment sub-object that is in your budget, and that's particularly interesting to me because we've been asking a lot of agencies in our budget hearings about deficiencies, and I know that MDE has a deficiency of $4.2 million for fiscal year 2027, but that's largely due to federal funds issues from EPA. I understand that. But we're trying to, as a subcommittee, wrap our heads around this idea that a lot of agencies have these deficiencies and are sort of backfilling them by going through the budgetary process of the following year. In this case, you're sort of doing the opposite with this miscellaneous adjustment sub-object, and I just kind of want to better understand what your plan is for dealing with that line item so that not only are we not going to have as many deficiencies going forward, hopefully, we're also not going to have miscellaneous money just sort of sitting there being collected without being properly accounted for or used for its purposes that it was intended. And then I have one quick permitting question after that, if I may, Madam Chair.
Yes, thank you very much, and we certainly are very grateful for our partnership with Andrew Gray and his thorough analysis, and certainly for highlighting the miscellaneous adjustment. We are certainly committed to transparent and accurate information. While we completed those adjustments annually, we have revised that process to complete that those readjustments and alignments monthly.
Great, thank
So
you.
they'll be reflected. Thank you.
Terrific, thank you. And then Exhibit 3 on the analysis is the one that talks about permit data. And I just noticed that for 2015, 2016, you were getting an average of 23,000 permit applications, and then 2026, 27, it's about 15,000. Any sense as to why a significant drop in the average, or the number of permits that the agency is receiving per year?
I believe that is in your area, Lee. Are you speaking of the water permits?
This is
which-
permit data in Exhibit 3. I think it's all permits.
Okay, all permits, and you want, so the question is why we've reduced the number of permits?
Why is there a reduction in the number of permits received, the applications received?
Okay.
If you know.
We should know, I have the directors here.
If I may, I believe that's actually an accounting change. It used to be that there were different tracking rules for the MFR versus our internal reports that fed our annual enforcement and compliance report, and we reconciled those, and now we use the same methodology as that annual enforcement and compliance report. And so that's why it looks like a lower number. It's a different way of measuring, and specifically measuring permits that have in fact left the building, so to speak. So I believe it's mostly an accounting change. It's not that we're receiving half as many permit applications.
Okay, all right, yeah, because I'm looking at applications received, not applications that have sort of been processed and gone out. But maybe we can follow up offline about that.
Happy to, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was actually a really important question, so thank you. Delegate Metzger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had to take my wife to the doctor, so it's important. You know, I can't let y'all out of here without talking about Back River wastewater treatment. Last night, I'm coming home from my last event, and my wife says, "You've got to fix Back River." It was horrendous, right outside the gate. And so I just want to, if you can just give me an update, and that'll be fine.
I appreciate your wife's pushing you on Back River, because we agree with her. But Back River is doing well right now. As you know, there's a consent decree, and they've reduced pollution by 60% in the last 4 years. We still have the regulatory oversight there, as you and I, we talked. And so I think a lot of citizens and Marylanders, including your family, are thinking, what's wrong with Back River? Because of the smell. But the smell issue it's not an indicator that the pollution is where it used to be a long time ago. The smell issue is a different issue, but the pollution is really, they're doing so much better. And they're at the limits where they're supposed to be, with slightly little small issues that we do see, but we're working with them every single day.
I don't want to disagree with you.
Okay.
But it's a health issue, and nobody will prove to me that it's not a health issue. It's horrible, and it's got to be dealt with, and I'm emphatic, it's got to be dealt with.
You're referring to the smell?
That,
Yeah. Did you want to make a final comment so we can make sure we address the issue too?
Yes, good afternoon, Lee Curry, Director of Water and Science Administration. The smell issue, we're on it. We solved the water issue, what the Secretary was talking about with what's coming out of the pipe. I think we're making great progress there, but we understand that there's the odor issue. One of the things we're doing is we have Chris Hoagland and his air team, and we have Rick Kessler, who deals with solids and how they're stored on the site. All three of us are working together on this. We just had a community meeting last Thursday evening, which I thought we're making great progress. It's an investigation. What I can commit to you is that we've got a good system in place. We've got the city at the table. They're a great partner. We've got the county at the table. We've got a rapid response system in place where if there is an odor, we can track it. And we've got Chris and his expert scientists trying to figure out how do we best solve this puzzle and get to the answer with the odor so that we can pull all the pieces together. So that's our commitment.
and whatever I could do to help, but it's got to be dealt with.
We're not walking away until it's dealt with. So we're there, and we're going to stay there until we figure it out together. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, now you all can
Okay.
take your seats, and we'll start with the public hearing. This is, I'd like all of these people to come up, and whoever gets here first can begin testifying. Matt Stegman, Bruce Daggy, or Daggy, Kennedy Brooks, Josh Tolkien, and that's actually it. All of you can come forward and take a seat. Hold on. Do not come forward if you're Bruce, Kennedy, or Josh. Just come forward if you're Matt. Thank you.
I'm here.
Please proceed.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. Matt Stegman from the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, here in support of the budget for the Maryland Department of the Environment. If I can maybe take the liberty of speaking a little bit on behalf of some of my colleagues in the environmental community. I think you have some written testimony from some other groups as well. MDE, we appreciate you asking them some tough questions. We as activists certainly ask a lot of them as well. But MDE does do a whole lot to protect the health of the Chesapeake Bay, to protect our air, our water, our land. And they are a really kind of tiny slice of the overall state spending picture, but they really have an outsized impact. And the things that they do are really kind of even more important now when we look at some of the changes in funding and in policy that have come down from the federal level. So we just want to make sure that they have the resources and the personnel that they need to keep our water clean and our land healthy and our air clean as well. That's it.
We appreciate your testimony, and we appreciate all of what you and the Chesapeake Bay Foundation do to help us with that goal that we both share.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And Secretary McElwain, I have bad news. You need to come up for one more question. in the hearing that would never end. There is one other issue that came to our attention. We just wanted to run it by you. This has to do with the concentrated animal feeding operations permit. And so it seems to be taking a while to get this done. And we need to know why it's taking so long. And I think part of the answer is the federal government, correct? Or no? You go ahead and tell me, why is it taking so long?
Okay, so I think there's two issues. One, it took too long in general because we missed the time it should have been done a long time ago, and we're correcting the permit. But we're almost there. We had to do a lot of coordination with the Department of Agriculture. We did public engagement. So we are trying to get it back on track, but right now, we're almost done with that permit. Can you just tell quickly where we are with the permit?
In fact, I met with my team, so the Land and Materials Administration has the CAFO program. I met with the CAFO program leaders this morning, directed them that the decision-making document, those areas where we want to possibly make changes to the draft, any decision points we have to make are due to me next week so that we can make those decisions and get them to the secretary no later than the week after. At that point, once those decisions are made, and they are not easy decisions, but they are decisions that have to be made, we will get those to the secretary, and then they will, in large likelihood, the permit will be revised and have to go back to the federal EPA for review. We're hopeful that by early summer, hopefully sooner than that, if I do my job correctly, we can get that in place.
So we can expect the permit to be issued by early summer. Can you guys commit to that?
Yes, we can commit to that.
And hopefully sooner, like March 30th?
It's important. We're late already. March 30th is a great day, but there's absolutely no way, unfortunately. And
Early summer means June sometime?
Yes.
You can commit to
the
that?
end of June.
Okay. And
Yes.
so there was something that happened within our own domain that caused the delay to begin with, correct?
Yeah, well, at my agency, we should have started this permit a long time ago.
Okay.
It lapsed. It created all the problems that we all know. We're all talking about, but I've fixed the internal issue with that.
Okay, so
and
we shouldn't have a lapse again?
no,
Okay.
we
and
will
we're-
not have a lapse again.
All right, and we're working to get it done, and we're communicating with the stakeholders.
That's absolutely correct.
That's it. Thank you.
Okay.
For
Thank
real
you.
this time.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, everyone, we are now moving on to the Maryland Energy Administration. We have Kelly Speaks Beckman as acting director who is here, and we have Ms. Bougel with us as the legislative analyst, and you may begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The budget for Maryland Energy Administration increases by $111.1 million, or 38.5%, to a total of $399.4 million in fiscal '27. We will start with MFR data. Exhibit 1 on page 6 presents the in-state renewable energy generation. In calendar 2024, in-state renewable energy generation increased by 17.6% compared to previous year. Exhibit 2 on page 7 shows the number of awards issued by MEA to promote renewable and clean energy. In fiscal 2025, MEA awarded a total of 8,912 grants to incentivize in-state renewable energy generation, an increase of 18.9% from fiscal 2024. Exhibit 3 on page 8 shows energy savings from energy efficiency programs. MEA anticipates an increase of 41.3% in overall energy savings in fiscal 2025. Individually, energy saving from low and moderate income energy efficiency programs are anticipated to decrease by 42.4%, and energy saving from other sectors programs are anticipated to increase by 58.5%. We are asking MEA to discuss the reason for the anticipated decrease in energy saving from LMI programs despite higher spending. On page 10, there is a discussion of fiscal 2025 closeout. At fiscal 25 closeout, MEA canceled a total of 39 million. MEA reported these cancellations were due to lack of sufficient applications. Although first requested in September, MEA did not provide explanations for these cancellations until February 14th. Providing DLS insufficient time to analyze the information. We are asking MEA to discuss the programs and associated canceled funds. MEA should discuss its efforts to fully utilize the authorized amounts. And DLS also recommends adding language restricting funds, pending submission of a report providing explanations of canceled funds at fiscal 26 closeout. Exhibit 5 on page 12 is the overview of agency spending. The largest share of fiscal 27 allowance consists of renewable and clean energy programs and initiatives at 306.1 million, an increase of 45.2% from fiscal 26. Of the total amount budgeted for renewable and clean energy, 100 million is contingent on legislation expanding allowable use of alternative compliance payments in the Strategic Energy Investment Fund. Exhibit 6 on page 13 is the agency spending by source. SIF sourced from SCPs total 198 million and is the largest source of funding in fiscal 27 allowance. SIF sourced from the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative revenues total 175.8 million of fiscal 27 allowance. As shown in Exhibit 7 on page 15, estimated non-regi source SIF balance excluding ACP totaled 4.8 million at the end of fiscal 25. Balance in fiscal 27 after accounting for encumbered funds and assuming full utilization of appropriated funds is estimated to be 3.5 million. Fiscal 27 allowance does not utilize the funds available in these sub-accounts with an exception of a small amount from the offshore wind development account. MEA should discuss the plan for expending remaining funds in these accounts. Exhibit 8 on page 16 compares the fiscal 27 allowance with the working appropriation. Fiscal 27 allowance increases by 111.1 million compared to fiscal 26. The primary areas of increase are renewable and clean energy programs and initiatives, which increased by 95 million, and low and moderate income energy efficiency and conservation programs, which increased by 17.8 million. Although typically MEA has provided its budget details, MEA did not provide this information during the 2025 session. As a result, committee narrative requested MEA to provide this information with submission of fiscal 27 budget. MEA did not provide this information until February 18th, providing DLS insufficient time to analyze or ask questions. Given that the fund sources within MEA vary in allowable uses, receiving data on the spending by fund source is critical to ensure planned expenditures comply with the statute. DLS recommends adding language restricting funds pending submission of MEA's funding detail. The Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act of 2026 includes 4 provisions impacting SIF. One provision authorizes the governor to transfer up to 33 million from the administration sub-account of SIF to general fund. Another authorizes a transfer of 259 million from ACP account of SIF to general fund. A set of provisions expand allowable use of Regi SIF revenues for various purposes, and a set of provisions expand allowable use of ACP SIF. The provisions expanding allowable uses will be further discussed. Chapter 38 of 2022 provided the Climate Catalytic Capital Fund 5 million annually outside of SIF between fiscal 24 and 26. These mandated funds have been provided through the University of Maryland College Park campus. Despite the mandate ending, 5 million is provided to the fund through MEA in fiscal 27. However, UMCP also includes 5 million in general funds. DLS recommends deleting the $5 million in general funds provided to CCCF. The recommendation related to deletion of these funds will appear as part of recommendations in UNCP. The fiscal 27 allowance for MEA includes federal funding available through Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which include $4.1 million from preventing outages and enhancing resilience of the electric grid program, $9.2 million from the state energy program, and $1.5 million from energy efficiency and conservation block grant. On page 21, we have the personnel data. In October, the Board of Public Work approved abolition of positions statewide. In MEA, one position was abolished, which was associated with voluntary separation program. Moving on to issues starting on page 22, the first issue covers ACP made under the Renewable Portfolio Standard Program. Due to the increase in RPS solar carve-out percentage requirements, as well as gradual increase in RPS Tier 1 requirements, RPS compliance through ACPs has increased. As shown in Exhibit 9 on page 23, between calendar 2015 and 2025, RPS Tier 1 requirement, excluding solar carve-out, increased by 18.5 percentage points. This requirement will fluctuate each year, reaching 35.5% in calendar 2030. As shown in Exhibit 10 on page 24, ACP revenue increased significantly beginning in calendar 2021. Initial growth in ACP occurred primarily from solar requirements. Since calendar 2023, solar-related ACP has declined, while general Tier 1 renewable-related ACP has become the dominant source. According to annual PSC reporting on the RPS program, total ACP of $362.3 million in calendar 2024 was required to meet program compliance. It is anticipated that ACP revenue will continue to remain elevated in the near term unless the amount of Tier 1 renewable sources capacity increases to meet the requirements. Exhibit 11 on page 25 shows the authorized uses of ACP-sourced SEEF as defined in the state government article, as well as other recent authorizations. Generally, ACP is authorized to support low and moderate income communities and provide grants to electric companies to be refunded to residential distribution customers. Chapter 604 of 2025 authorized funds for MEA and MDOT for specific purposes in fiscal 26 only. MEA should comment if it anticipates full utilization of the $50 million authorized by this chapter. As shown in Exhibit 12 on page 26, the fiscal 27 allowance for MEA includes over $198 million in ACP source SEEF. Of the total, $100 million is contingent upon enactment of legislation expanding authorized uses of ACP revenue. DLS notes that funding for local government energy modernization, commercial building program, and open energy innovation grant program that are being considered as allowable to use under current law do not appear to be allowable uses based on the information that is provided. MEA should comment on the uses of the funds for these programs to describe how they are being used to support LMI communities. DLS also recommends adding language making funds for these programs contingent of enactment of legislation expanding the uses of ACP. Fiscal 27 allowance includes $312 million from ACP revenues in SEEF for all state agencies, which are contingent on enactment of legislation expanding allowable uses. Exhibit 13 on page 28 shows the expanded uses of ACP that are included in BRFA and Senate Bill 386 and House Bill 897. BRFA and the administration bills both expand allowable uses of ACP revenues in SEEF to provide funding to MEA and the Department of General Services for creation of new Tier 1 renewable energy sources and provide funding to MDOT for transmission infrastructure. For the expanded uses for ACP included in both BRFA and administration bills, DLS recommends striking duplicative provisions in the BRFA. DLS also recommends striking the provision authorizing $15 million to PSC for transmission technologies and instead recommends this authorization be included in the administration bills. In the analysis for State Reserve Fund, DLS recommended deleting the $42 million for higher education research. DLS therefore recommends striking the provision authorizing the use of these funds for that purpose. Exhibit 14 on page 29 shows RPA's ACP sub-account fund balance. The ACP fund balance increased substantially beginning in fiscal 2022. The fiscal 27 ending balance is estimated to total $0.2 million after accounting for the fiscal 27 budget plan, including the transfers and expanded use of the funds. Issue 2 covers RGGI auction revenues. As shown in Exhibit 16 on page 32, total RGGI program revenues received by Maryland from all auctions held in fiscal 25 totaled $267.5 million, which is the highest yearly revenue in program history. This is an increase of $53.3 million or 24.9% from fiscal 24. Exhibit 17 on page 34 provides the current statutory allocation of RGGI revenues as required by the state government article. Department of Human Services receives the largest portion of the auction revenues for energy assistance. The allocation of RGGI auction revenues to the various SEIF sub-accounts occurs following the distribution of certain amounts required by statute. Compared to previous years, the number of items taken off the top before the revenue distribution increased. In fiscal 27, 3 new items totaling $24.7 million are added to the list. DLS notes that transfer prior to allocation reduces fund available to be allocated. Particularly, dollar amount available for energy assistance is impacted the most as it receives the highest percentage of RGGI revenues after the transfers. MEA should discuss why some of the new items are being taken off the top of the revenue before distribution and how it determines which programs should or should not be distributed through this manner. As shown in Exhibit 18 on pages 36 and 37, the fiscal 27 allowance includes a total of $399.7 million in RGGI-sourced SEIF spending, an increase of $74.7 million primarily due to increases of $27.8 million in LMI energy efficiency programs, an increase of $55.1 million in renewable and clean energy programs and initiatives. DLS notes that the governor's fiscal 27 budget book identifies RGGI source SEIF as the source of climate catalytic capital fund. However, MEA provided documents that indicate that this funding is split between RGGI and SEIF. MEA should clarify the source of funds used for this purpose. Exhibit 19 on page 38 provides a breakdown of appropriations that are contingent on enactment of RGGI revenue expansion included in BRFA, which authorizes $15.8 million in RGGI revenue for various purposes. Issue 3 covers a federal Inflation Reduction Act programs, Maryland's application for home energy performance-based whole house rebate program, high efficiency electric home rebate program, and state-based home energy efficiency contractor training grant program has been conditionally approved by the U.S. Department of Energy. MEA reports additional approvals are required before funding becomes accessible. Issue 4, starting on page 40, covers EV charging infrastructure funding. The IIJA provided funds for EV charging infrastructure through the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Formula Program and Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Program. In December 2025, 3 charging stations built under first round of Navy became operational in Maryland. On October 28, 2025, MDOT announced conditional awards under round 2 of the Navy program. In regards to the CFI program, in December 2025, Maryland, along with other states, sued the federal administration for withholding funds included for this program. Exhibit 21 on page 43 presents data on total annual registration of zero-emission vehicles in Maryland and the total number of publicly accessible charging stations statewide. Through its programming, MEA has incentivized 2,818 charging stations as of fiscal 2025, which is a decrease compared to fiscal 2024. MEA should comment on this decrease. Recommended action starting on page 44. The first and second recommendations are languages that modify language making a portion of appropriation in MEA contingent on expansion of allowable uses to more closely identify the expanded uses for which these funds will be used. Recommendation 3 strikes language making a portion of the appropriation in MEA contingent on expansion of allowable uses. Instead, two pieces of language mentioned in recommendation 1 and 2 are added. Recommendation 4 is a language withholding funds until details on MEA's funding are provided with submission of fiscal 28 budget. Recommendation 5 is language withholding funds until a report is submitted providing explanation on fund cancellations at fiscal 26 closeout. Recommendation 6 makes a portion of the appropriation in MEA contingent on expansion of allowable uses. Recommendation 7 is a committee narrative requesting a report on revenue assumption, fund balance, and uses of CEF revenues sourced from REGI program auctions. Recommendation 8 is a committee narrative requesting report on federal funding. Recommendation 9 is a committee narrative requesting report on uses of $100 million in SCP provided to MEA. There are BRFA-related recommended actions as well. The first recommendation is to strike language authorizing funds from SCP account of CEF to provide $20 million to DGS, $30 million to MEA for creation of new Tier 1 renewable energy sources, $10 million to MDOT for transmission infrastructure, and $15 million to PSC for grid enhancing and transmission technologies that are also related to expanded authorization in separate legislation to avoid duplication and potentially conflicting outcomes. Second recommendation on page 49 is to strike language authorizing funds from SCP account of CEF transferred to the dedicated purpose account to provide $42 million for higher education research grants. That was recommended to be deleted in the analysis for State Reserve Fund. That concludes my presentation, and I'll take any questions.
Thank you very much for that comprehensive report. And now we would ask the Maryland Energy Administration's Acting Secretary, Kelly Speaks Beckman, to respond.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to present our comments on behalf of MEA. Special thank you goes to Suveksha for her thoughtful analysis and overview of our budget. With me today is James Cobb, Director of Finance, and behind us are a number of additional Maryland Energy Administration staff ready to respond to your questions. For the record, I'm Kelly Speaks Backman. I'm on day 66 today at the Maryland Energy Administration, and I'm really excited to be here. The mission of MEA is to promote clean, affordable, reliable energy and energy-related greenhouse gas emission reductions to the benefit of Marylanders in a just and equitable manner. And Maryland is facing serious energy challenges, especially as it regards to affordability. Our question is, how do we address the very real and the very critical issues of affordability while maintaining our climate and resilience goals? We do this by advancing impactful energy policy and by administrating a broad portfolio of financial and technical assistance to Maryland residents, businesses, schools, and local governments. MEA deploys funds from the Strategic Energy Investment Fund, or SEIF, to help Marylanders access clean energy and to implement energy efficiency and cost-effective electrification practices. Of our roughly $400 million allocation for fiscal year 27, most of it, about $387 million to be specific, would go back out the door to fund financial and technical assistance for Marylanders. In fiscal year 25 alone, our programs incentivized the deployment of nearly 100 megawatts of solar capacity. It served 6,326 low and moderate income households and funded projects expected to reduce annual greenhouse gas emissions by 116,402 metric tons of CO2 equivalents. This impact is equivalent to the carbon sequestered by more than 3 million treed seedlings grown for 10 years, or taking 24,588 internal combustion cars off the road. In our 2024, fiscal years 2024 and 2025 programs, our community solar program added 78 megawatts of solar to the grid, serving 10,500 low and moderate income subscriber households who are anticipated to see $99 million in total utility bill savings over 20 years. And finally, we funded 14 public school electrification projects in 9 counties in fiscal years 24 and 25. These projects are anticipated to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 1,923 metric tons of CO2 annually, and for a lifetime savings of 38,832 metric tons over the lifetime. Really, this is roughly the program that we implemented roughly impacted 36,018 students to benefit from these projects. So I'd like to go through the referenced questions that we just heard from Suveksha, and just starting off on pages 10 and 18, page 10 regarding a review of closeout processes, and page 18 regarding a report on funding by program and source. We agree with these recommendations. On page 8, DLS requests that MEA discuss the reason for the anticipated decrease in energy savings from low and moderate income energy efficiency programs, despite our higher spending in fiscal year 25. The response to that is really the simplest and the least costly energy efficiency measures, such as lighting, are becoming less common with the near ubiquitous and universal adoption of low-cost LED lights. It's actually a good story. To achieve energy and cost savings, though, projects must increasingly rely on replacing higher cost measures like HVAC equipment, equipment that has also experienced meaningful increases in labor and material costs due to inflation, tariffs, and other factors. In addition, a greater share of funds have been allocated to address health and safety conditions that require remediation before the energy efficiency retrofit can be implemented. On page 14, DLS requests that MEA discuss the plan for expanding remaining funds in non-Regi source sub-accounts. The majority of those funds are associated with 2 PSC-directed expenditures related to the Pepco Exelon merger and the Alta Gas WGL merger. Both funds are severely restricted in how they can be utilized. On the Pepco Exelon side, MEA is assigning the remaining funds to qualifying efficiency and combined heat and power projects. I'm trying not to use acronyms too much, on a case-by-case basis to draw down those funds. On the Alta Gas WGL settlement, funding was restricted to projects that expand natural gas utilization and infrastructure in Maryland, with a set-aside for use only within the WGL territory. Now, in line with Maryland's climate goals, MEA no longer funds natural gas expansion. We were authorized under Section 3 of the 2023 BRFA to use $9.25 million of the money derived from the WGL merger to support repair of existing natural gas infrastructure in the WGL territory. In fiscal year 24, MEA allocated that $9.25 million to WGL for leak repairs and has no plans to use the remaining funds. Turning to page 26, DLS asks MEA if we anticipate full utilization of the $50 million authorized by Chapter 604 in fiscal year 2026. The answer is yes. We do anticipate full utilization. The Local Government Energy Modernization, or LGEM program, was designed as a formula-based block grant program for Maryland counties. It allows counties to utilize awarded funds for planning and execution of clean energy projects over the 3 years. Due to the flexibility of this program design and the aggressive outreach to local governments, we received 22 of 24 counties' applications. On page 26, MEA is asked to describe how certain funds are being used to support low and moderate income communities. About a quarter of MEA programs limit eligibility exclusively to projects located in or benefiting low and moderate income and overburdened communities in Maryland. We included an illustrative list of some of these programs in our written testimony. On page 28, The recommendation is to strike duplicative provisions in the BRFA, and we agree that duplicative provisions should be avoided. However, we do disagree with the proposed remedy. We believe the language related to expanded uses of ACP contained within the BRFA is more expansive than the administration's energy bill and should remain in the BRFA. Specifically, ACP use is heavily restricted to specific census tracts or income limits. For the next 5 years only, the BRFA would allow ACP to be used to promote Tier 1 renewable sources without additional restrictions in current law. On page 35, we are asked to discuss why some of the new items are being taken off the top instead of being allocated under the related program. And now, where the law requires transfers or programs sourced from the CEF, notwithstanding the RGGI formula, MEA believes that off-the-top distributions are appropriate. They ensure that MEA programs are not sort of crowded out by external programs funded under a specific RGGI account. To clarify the source of funds used for the Climate Catalytic Capital Fund on page 35, the source of funds should be the RGGI Renewable and Clean Energy Programs subaccount. DLS also asks MEA to comment on page 42 on the decrease in MEA incentivized charging stations. Our EV charging station rebates are available to both residential and commercial applicants. And due to the increasing installation costs, in fiscal year 25, more residential rebates were awarded at that $700 cap than in previous years, making fewer rebates possible. On the commercial side, rebates in fiscal year 25 were also higher, $15,091 on average per applicant compared to $10,600 in fiscal year 24. MEA also launched a community EV-SE program. Now that program in fiscal year 25 funded projects to support 187 EV charging ports, of which 122 of those are level 2 and 65 are DC fast charging ports. Overall, the installation of fast chargers across programs rose from 32 ports in fiscal year 24 to 111 ports in fiscal year 25. So the DC fast chargers are more expensive than the level 2, but the fast chargers also offer significantly faster charging, allowing more vehicles to charge within a given period. And lastly, we would like to comment briefly on the operating recommended actions on pages 44 through 49. We respectfully request that the proposed gap financing program identified in recommendation 1 be made contingent on the BRFA language, authorizing expanded allowable uses of alternative compliance payments, rather than making this condition contingent on legislation specifically authorizing a gap financing program. We believe that we already have the authority to operate a gap financing program, but we need additional flexibility to deploy the ACP funds for that particular purpose. So with that, I appreciate your time and attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the subcommittee may have.
Thank you for that, and we appreciate you going through the legislative analysis piece by piece. It helps us stay on track. Before we begin, would you set the stage by explaining, just for everyone's reminder, since it's been a year since we discussed this, the two sources of CEF funding and what's the purpose and limitation of each? Jimmy, you want to take that?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is James Cobb. I'm Director of Finance and Administration. The CEF is compiled of basically two main sources of funding. One is the RGGI source, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Auctions, happens quarterly. The number has risen as was reflected in the analysis. The highest in 25, I think, was $280 million roughly. And the other component is alternative compliance payments, which has risen from my time coming here of about $20 million to $365 million last year. The restrictions, we have the allocation for the RGGI side. 50% goes energy assistance through DHS. 20% goes to renewable energy programs, 10% for energy efficiency for low and moderate income, and 10% for energy efficiency for all other uses, and 10% up to $7.5 million goes for administrative costs. And again, the other side of it is the ACP component, which is broken down between solar and other components.
It's important to note that we do not rely on general funds for our operations and our programs.
Correct. Okay, everyone, are you ready to proceed? Delegate Spiegel has some questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Director, for the presentation and for your work. And I know you're new, so bearing that in mind, unfortunately, you're going to have to bear the brunt of some frustrations that I'm going to express today, which go back before your tenure, but I have to express them anyway. We see in the details of the reports out of MEA over the last couple of years, including the DLS analysis this year, a lot of unused, unencumbered, or canceled expenditures. I actually asked specifically about this at last year's MEA budget hearing, and I'm frustrated and concerned because we all know CEF balances are ballooning hundreds of millions of dollars beyond maybe what we anticipated, but those funds exist to be used to address the existential threats of climate change and to reflect the values that Maryland has of investing in this priority. They're not being used enough, and they're not being used fast enough, in my opinion. And, you know, just a few examples that I saw in going through the details of the DLS analysis, right? We still have this fiscal year 2025, $39 million canceled grants, which, as I understand it, was because of a lack of grant applications, which to me sort of boggles the mind if there was $39 million there to be used and we didn't have enough people applying for it, so we couldn't deploy it. And as the analyst said, MEA didn't provide a timely or adequate explanation. I understand. I've gone through your technical answers and your written testimony, and I understand that in the last few days we have received a written answer, and we'll take a look at that. That's one example that I'm frustrated by. The offshore wind fund, I don't really have a good sense that we are spending that money, right? $20 million in the account, but that does not account for encumbrances. It's not clear to me whether that money is being spent or just compiled and collected for some future time when we hope we can invest some of it or some more of it, some significant portion of it in the offshore wind goal. The analysis talks about how the FY27 proposed budget doesn't use $7 million in the non-Regi sourced sub-accounts, and that details haven't been provided to reconcile appropriations with programmatic activities. So all of this, you know, just to me sort of feeds my frustration as I think about how we can make sure that when we talk about expanded use of ACP revenues in the CEF, when we talk about how to deploy this money for the purposes that it was intended, and when we have all these broader discussions about whether or not money in the CEF should be transferred for other purposes or used to balance the budget elsewhere in the state, I want to be able to go back to folks and say, well, this money is being deployed, or there's a big grand plan to make sure that we're deploying it better so that we don't have to sort of hem and haw when people say, why shouldn't we just move this money somewhere else to be able to balance the budget? So that's my frustration. I understand all of the sort of individual technical answers to each of those examples. I get it. But I think there's a big picture narrative here that we need to work on and figure out a plan for. I'm happy to give you a moment to respond to that, or we can talk further later. I do have a few other specific questions not related to that. But I wanted to bring up that frustration because I think it's a frustration that I am not alone in feeling.
Well, first of all, sir, I appreciate your being forthright with me and being just really blunt with me. I have some of the same questions coming in as you've just asked yourself, and I will tell you, you're not the first person who's asked me these same questions. Our agency is focused on bringing down costs for consumers, ensuring reliability, and making sure that we're meeting our goals, our climate goals. And for me, that is in the sectors of transportation, of the power grid, of buildings, whether that be residential or commercial, and of our industry, the industrial or manufacturing portion that we have. And as we, let me just say, as I have come into Maryland Energy Administration, I am looking through that lens of what is our input in terms of funding, and how is that getting us to those goals in those specific sectors? And so I think you'll see over the next 6 to 12 months, there will be some changes at Maryland Energy Administration to be more transparent, and not that, I'm not saying that we're not already being as transparent as we can, but to organize ourselves more closely around who we are impacting so that you can see it better. Because these people are doing amazing work. I've delved into the details of it. I just think we have, as you say, and we have to be able to tell a better story of how we're making an impact and how we're changing folks' lives. Now, to your specific questions, if you'd like to respond,
Well, on the reversions or the grants that get canceled, a lot of ours are big, long-term, meaning more than a year, and so the funds might be encumbered, say from 2024, and then for whatever reason, the applicant cancels. Well, we can't make them stay and keep the grant going. So the money comes back, gets put back into the fund balance to hopefully be used the next year for an application that will go through from start to finish. Some of the others were part of the dedicated purpose that we didn't have the time to spend it all. And so it goes back into the dedicated purpose account for us to now do a budget amendment for use in this year. So it's not that it's not being utilized, it's being put back in to be utilized at a future time. And some of our programs, we did not receive enough applicants, but then others, we received too many applications, and then we have to work with DBM and try and see if we can move and reallocate funds to those programs that are oversubscribed versus those that are undersubscribed. And so but we've gotten better in my time since I've been here almost 3 years. I know we've gone from spending, say, 60 to 70% of our appropriated funds to 85 to 90%. So we are getting more out. As our budget has gone, we're still spending more.
Thank you. I think we're going to have some follow-up conversations about that, but I appreciate your answers. I do want to ask a couple of other specific questions, not part of that larger narrative, but just out of curiosity. On the LGEM program, my understanding is, there's a formula, it's a block grant to the counties that apply, but there is an element of that program that allows for discretionary grants to municipalities as well, and I'm just curious if you know whether any municipalities have applied at the municipal level for the discretionary piece of that grant.
coming to the table is Eric Kaufman, Director of Programs.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Yes, we had Eric Kaufman, Director of Energy Programs, for the record. We had a turnout both from the formula, but we also had a significant number of municipalities apply for the funding as well. And the demand is there. We wanted to make sure we could serve both audiences, whether it's a county or a municipality, to the same ends of installing solar energy efficiency and reducing cost and greenhouse gas emissions in their buildings.
Great. So there were some awards to those applicants at the municipal level?
The awards have not been made yet. They are pending,
okay.
But they are imminent.
Understood. Okay, great. Thank you. I also wanted to ask about the EVSE program. I asked the Maryland Department of Agriculture this the other day, so the answer might be the same for you all. Are the discussions around federal funding from the bipartisan infrastructure law, which provided $5 billion, I think, nationwide for the deployment of EV infrastructure, charging infrastructure, does that affect anything you're doing at the state level with the EVSE program through MEA or not?
It doesn't affect the funding that we're deploying directly, in that we're deploying funds. We have grant application, we evaluate it, we place based on the criteria of the programs, but certainly affects the overall availability of charging services. We planned our efforts very closely with the Department of Transportation, with them focusing on different areas that we are to make sure that we get adequate coverage of charging across our communities.
Are you also working with State Department of Agriculture as
I
well?
was just going to add that,
Yeah,
as well as
yeah.
with the Department of Agriculture.
It's kind of strange that these programs are sort of spread out among different agencies, but they're all working on this charging infrastructure, which theoretically should serve all types of electric vehicles across the state. So thank you for that. And then my final question, since the director was talking about the inability to deploy things like energy efficient light bulbs because so many people are using them, and you mentioned HVAC as it's a higher cost but more impactful investment. I wanted to ask if MEA has any specific programs incentivizing or piloting heat pump systems as opposed to HVAC systems.
Sir, we do not have a specific heat pump program, but we have multiple programs that are inclusive of heat pumps to be able to be utilized. Eric, do you want to go into detail with that?
Absolutely. We've woven heat pumps into a number of our programs. Our residential energy equity program, which provides it focuses energy efficiency and affordability, but when we fund a house that gets an HVAC replacement, it is a heat pump. There's a significant number of those have been installed under that program. We also have programs that are directly focusing on helping local governments and schools improve their infrastructure, which often includes heat pumps as part of those deployments as well. And we also work in the world of innovation we have an innovation program looking at sort of some unique, often installations that can help people understand the true benefits of heat pumps in different circumstances.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Those are my questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Fun 66 days so far. Long may it continue.
Woohoo!
Great to see you. Thank you so much. I wanted to specifically ask, and this dovetails a little bit on my colleague's question, but really getting into the low, moderate income energy efficiency programs. I read your response to the DLS analysis and question. If I'm being totally candid, which I appreciate your appreciation for, I found it a little unsatisfying, and help me understand if I am misunderstanding an aspect here. But from what I understand you're saying is that initially we were able to do things like get light bulbs into more homes, and that was a way for us to get an energy saving. Now most people can just go to Home Depot and buy them for pretty cheap, and so the need for us to sort of subsidize that is less, and so now we have to move into more expensive equipment, heating, cooling, et cetera, right? And that costs more. And so that reflects why the amount of encumbrances and costs in the program would significantly increase. But that doesn't answer the question of why the efficiencies have decreased, unless I'm missing it, right? Because ideally, if we're putting more money into the more expensive equipment, there's an initial capital cost up front to get the equipment out there. But once the equipment is being utilized, we should start to see energy savings. So what am I missing in the differentiation there? Because just to sort of put a fine point on this, the lack of deployment of resources in areas like this is why one of the reasons why there's so much cash sitting in the account that is then being deployed to other places in tight budget times. And so the more that we can deploy resources in areas like this and get the money out there and also show the energy savings, allows us to make the case that the money shouldn't go to other places in tight budget times. So one, if you could correct me if I'm misunderstanding the proportion, the relationship between the expense upfront and the savings, and then two, help me understand how that isn't also sort of the solution, right? Which is, okay, we've moved on to the more intensive equipment. That's where we should really be getting a lot of savings if we're deploying the resources correctly.
I think there are some clarifications that Mr. Kaufman will provide, but I will agree with you that we should be getting the money out there as quickly as possible. So we are actually, as soon as we get through this legislative session, we will be re-examining how we are administrating the funds, if it is the most effective and efficient way of doing so, and how can we get that out faster and faster. Eric?
Now, regarding the question of light emitting diode, light bulbs versus HVAC, heating, ventilating, air conditioning, and cooling equipment. So the the light bulbs, they do get a larger return on investment per dollar. They're lower cost, they have a high savings, they have a very quick savings. The heating and cooling equipment, it does have a lower level of savings per dollar spent. It has savings, and it can be very large in terms of someone's household budget, but they are lower per dollar spent than the other measures. They're just more costly equipment, and as Director Speaks-Boxman mentioned earlier, that equipment has also been heavily impacted by increases due to tariffs, inflation, and other factors. In terms of low to moderate income funding, we have consistently, year over year, the portion of the funding that comes from the RGGI formula, low to moderate income energy efficiency funding portion of the formula, we have consistently allocated almost 100% in most years, with demand far exceeding that year over year over year. So there definitely is appetite for that funding.
Okay, great, thank you. Just want to reiterate how important it is, especially in that particular area for our low and moderate income constituents who get hit the hardest by rising energy bills, especially as it relates to percentage of their own individual budgets, and then also as it relates to the costs themselves. We just have to be doing everything we can to deploy those resources as quickly and efficiently as we can.
Absolutely, yes, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's it for me.
Committee members, do we have anything else? There are many proposals out there for the SEEF funding, both obviously the proposals that are in the governor's budget and the BRFA, and there are proposals to change those proposals, and then there are new proposals. And if it's okay with you, would you mind commenting on a couple of ideas that are floating out of there? What you think of the efficiency of some of these ideas in terms of meeting our goals? One somebody mentioned was the heat pumps. And you're telling us that you're incorporating that now in different ways. Another is induction stoves. Any thoughts on induction stoves in terms of meeting our goals? And if you don't want to comment, or you don't feel prepared to comment, that's okay. You can always send us something.
Well, being prepared to comment has never stopped me, so. Ma'am, in terms of money for heat pumps, there are multiple, how shall I say this? There are multiple proposals out there that are supporting specific technology of heat pumps, which we appreciate and we agree with, that heat pumps can be a great way for saving folks money. What I personally have concerns with is the very, very strict use of funding for only one technology when there's another, there may be a different technology that is applicable. This is why I'm focused on residential buildings, commercial buildings, grid storage, so that we can use the array of technologies that are available for saving money and for putting power on the grid, because that's a big part of why we have higher costs these days. And so while I appreciate the intent of so many of these bills, I'm not sure they're all aligned to be the most effective use of dollars. And that's why you hear MEA staff and me talking about having some flexibility in the programs so that we can best help the customers.
And you mentioned that in a couple of times in your response, where you felt the language was broad enough as it was, or maybe it needed to be broader.
And you mentioned also induction stoves. We do not currently fund for induction stoves. While it has great merits in its environmental attributes, it doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily in the wheelhouse of MEA as we've thought in the past to relate so much to the energy that we're using. The energy savings aren't necessarily as much as the
It has environmental impacts and
attributes.
Cleaner air and that sort of thing, but it's
Yes.
not helping to save energy. What about window heat pumps?
Eric, I'm going to turn to you on the window heat pumps. We're intrigued by the technology. It has substantial promise, candidly. We are actually working with the Department of Housing and Community Development, which has many buildings, which where it will work very well structurally in terms of the type of structure where it's used, that we're working to identify a potential pilot with them so that we can actually see them in action, record the results, and understand how much potential savings they can yield.
Okay. How do you feel about, there is a proposal in the BRFA to amend the CEF to add funding for the power plant research. Do you have a feeling on that, how useful that would be to us in solving the problems that we have right now?
I'm going to turn to Eric again, but I do want to say that we're getting to, I should say I am, my staff is certainly fully knowledgeable about our work with PPRP. I am just getting up to speed on how we work with them. And
Totally
so,
understand.
Thank you.
And you are excused.
Thank you.
But the staff is not.
I'll add to that there is a substantial queue of projects awaiting power plant research services. The work they do to look at the project is part of the overall, in consultation with the Public Service Commission, is part of the overall CPCN process, Certificate of Public Convenience and Need. And clearing that queue is a way to get a lot of generation online that can help with affordability. And one of the #1 asks from the solar industry is that PPRP has the resources to be able to clear that queue so that we can unlock this potential generation in the state of Maryland.
So the proposal, why do I remember? I think the proposal was for $3 million. Is that, am I remembering that correctly?
It's $5
million? Did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, sure thing. Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Ian Ullman. I'm a senior energy advisor at MEA. I think the proposal in the budget this year is a little over $5 million. I would agree with my colleague that it's absolutely crucial to the industry to get those CPCNs out as quickly as possible. That includes PPRP funding, and I think this subcommittee, I watched the hearing, had a similar conversation with the Public Service Commission. Having those resources in order to clear those applications is critical to meeting our clean energy goals.
So is this the $5 million that was in the BRFA for PSC?
It's not.
It's for you.
This is right. So this is a provision in the BRFA that allows for RGGI. You talked at the beginning of this about the different parts of the CEF. Right. This is about adding as an authorized use of RGGI to help fund PPRP. PPRP currently gets its revenue from basically a surcharge on ratepayers, similar to the way the Public Service Commission and some other entities are funded. I think in an effort to avoid additional ratepayer surcharges, the decision was made to utilize the CEF for this purpose. So the BRFA language is simply authorizing, right? Then there's in the budget, you'll find the corresponding, I think it's around $5 million for FY27.
For MEA?
It's not for MEA. It's not part of MEA's budget at all. It's simply to allow for CEF funds to be directed to PPRP.
I think Delegate Spiegel, or am I remembering this correctly? But what was the $5 million in the PSC's budget that we were questioning? The $5 million and the $10 million. Do you remember?
Yeah.
As I understand it, it's for researching transmission technologies, but it's reliant on the results of the work of MEA, and so PSC is waiting for a work product from MEA in order to move forward with its portion of that larger effort.
Right? Yeah, and I would look forward to working with the committee to get that language correct in the BRFA to make sure that everybody's expectations are clear. I think that the funding there is expected to last for multiple years. I don't think that's necessarily clear in the way it was introduced, but I'd be happy to work with this committee, the Public Service Commission, anybody else to make sure that everybody's expectations are clear about how that funding can be utilized to make sure that our infrastructure is being utilized as efficiently as possible. This is about transmission, grid enhancing technologies that are really important to unlocking the grid to make it work better, and that, which is a benefit to ratepayers in multiple ways.
Delegate Spiegel, didn't PSC say they were not aware what that funding was for and that they did not need it?
They may have said that, yeah.
Yeah.
I think since that conversation, we've had some further discussions with the Public Service Commission, and that's why I think it would be important to have a conversation with this committee about exactly what the purposes are for that so that we can get it right.
10 million of it was for research and 5 million of it was presumably for deployment, right?
But the two are related, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so we want to make sure that that conversation happens, and it's really probably most important to go through our council. And so maybe you two could connect after the hearing, just to make sure that you get that. I mean, we're moving very, very quickly on the budget, and we probably only have another week or two at most. So
We will follow up this week.
yeah, we do want to get that right, because it did sound like there was a disconnect somewhere between the two agencies or between the administration and the agencies.
I read you crystal clear.
Okay, great. So that's helpful. Were there any other proposals that people, I'm staying on the proposals for the extra CEF or the additional proposals. Was there any other questions on those? Because they've been floating around from different places. Members, anything else that you wanted to ask about regarding use of CEF funding? Delegate Edelson.
Just to follow up on the heat pump response that you provided about the flexibility on different technologies, which I understand and makes sense, but I also, my recollection is that there's the governor issued an executive order essentially saying that as of, I think it's around 2030, we shouldn't be able to buy any gas-powered technology in this area. So I guess in that scenario, don't we have to be deploying the funds into heat pumps?
No, okay.
I think that's right, Delegate. I think the question is how best to do it, right? There's multiple programs that are moving towards electrification of the building sector. Part of it is regulatory. You had the Department of Environment come up here earlier. You had I think there was a question about BEPS. That's one program. From a funding standpoint, there's the funding that MEA provides, part of our suite of energy efficiency programs, which includes electrification. Mr. Kaufman talked about the partnership with GHCD and their electrification programs. There's also the utility run programs and power, which was recently changed to be a greenhouse gas mitigation program that specifically includes fuel switching to fund heat pumps. So I think that all we're saying here is not that electrification shouldn't move forward, but what's the best way to do it? I think that's really our answer.
Okay. Thank you.
And what time frame?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions on CEF funding or spending? Do you have anything you'd like to volunteer? Any good ideas that you want us to consider?
Well, I think one of the things that we are doing at Maryland Energy Administration is not solely how we spend money on the programs, but how we get the policies right. And the policies are not just specific to Maryland, but how we interact with our regional transmission operator, because frankly, about 2/3 of our bill, half on generation and maybe 1/3 or so on transmission and other costs are coming from PJM. And our work should be equally focused on how to make sure to get their governance correct and how to get them to cooperate with the states consistent with our state policies. And so that is a great focus of mine as well, and we'll be spending much more time and much more effort in that way. I mean, we were pleased to see is it last month already? We were pleased to see last month that the capacity, the cap was extended on the capacity price for out to 2030. That will help, but it's not enough. Mm-hmm. We need to make sure that we have a voice in PJM, that we have a seat at the table. And so we will be having further discussions with them on governance. Now, that doesn't necessarily have a great impact on our budget, but you'll see the personnel, as we're working through more policy issues, you'll see our personnel focused more on the policy side, and also to be an advisor to this body and to the Maryland General Assembly.
And that's very welcome.
Thank you.
We could use that. Not that you haven't been already.
Absolutely.
But things are getting more and more complex.
Yes.
And we are part-time legislators, as you know. And so any help you can provide to all of us is much appreciated. And we appreciate all the work that you're doing and have been doing. And we know that, you know, it's not an easy area to be in. Do we have any other questions? Okay, we do have a few people who are ready to testify, and those people I called before can come forward. I do want to ask one question, though. Which acting secretary has been here longer, MDOT or MEA?
I've got you by like 3 days.
You're both in the 60 days-ish timeframe. Yes, you are excused, and we can have Bruce Dagey, Kennedy Brooks, Josh Tolkien, Matt Stegman all come forward. And you may begin from whoever sits down first. Please proceed, and let us know who you are.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. My name is Josh Tolkien on behalf of the Maryland chapter of the Sierra Club. Thank you for allowing us to testify today. I first want to commend the Maryland Energy Administration for their excellent programs. Last week, we heard several people testify not able to attend today who had participated in a variety of applications, from the residential energy efficiency and solar program to the LGEM program. We see enthusiasm, we see a willingness and an excitement of people to participate. Secondly, I do want to echo MEA's request for increased clarity and simplicity. I think the more that we can simplify the rules but clarify and affirm the goals, the more we'll be able to empower the agency to achieve these goals, but perhaps with less fine-tuned restrictions. That being said, and this may seem ironic, I do want to make our specific pitch for the importance of heat pumps and induction stoves, not just on the implementation of the zero emission executive order mentioned earlier, but we know that new technologies require education of the workforce, education of the public, building enthusiasm, and building up the particular systems that we need to increase adoption. And we know that as we're shifting from light bulbs to appliances, we'll need to be working with contractors, working across all of our sectors, and there'll be a learning curve. And the proposed $88 million that we've recommended is a small amount compared to what we will need someday. And for us to be in the place we want to be 3 to 4 years from now, we need to start an investment. But I'll emphasize that many of us are recommending a heavy focus on replacing electric resistance systems, which actually has a much, much higher and initial payback period that's economically advantageous. We are also strongly supportive of the incentives for induction stoves. It doesn't need to be the $400 million, but it's critical that Maryland has this program somewhere, and we believe that MEA is the most appropriate agency to house it. Lastly, I just wanted to say that the community, the environmental community, the contractors are excited to be collaborative participants in all of these programs. We had a press conference last week with people who were participating in the grant programs, people who wanted to participate, people who applied but did not end up getting the funding. And we know that the public is increasingly concerned about climate change, enthusiastic about clean energy, and very excited to continue and I think grow their partnership with the Maryland Energy Administration. I would be remiss if I didn't point out that the single biggest thing that we can do to advance clean energy in the state at this moment is to redirect the upwards of $500 million that is being directed out of the Strategic Energy Investment Fund and direct it into the valuable programs that you've been hearing about today. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Kennedy Brooks, and I'm the Climate and Food Justice Fellow at the Capitol Market in Prince George's County. We support community-led development along the Blue Line Corridor. In this role, I support sustainability initiatives at Gethsemane United Methodist Church in Capitol Heights, which is a 45-year anchor institution. And some of the work that I do includes native plantings, reforestation across the church's 17-acre campus, creating resident green teams, and sustainability projects, including the church's boiler replacement. The church's oil-fired boiler was installed in 1961, and each winter, Gethsemane spends nearly $30,000 on fuel oil to the building. In 2024, Gethsemane was awarded funds to replace it through MEA's Electrifying Community Buildings program, to replace the aging boiler with high-efficiency electric HVAC systems and to upgrade electrical infrastructure. This is going to eliminate about 6,500 gallons of heating oil and reduce carbon pollution by about 70 metric tons every year, and also helping families who come to church for food and fellowship and worship to breathe clean air indoors. This area, Capitol Heights, is both a healthy food priority area and a health enterprise zone, and so residents experience higher rates of asthma, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and hypertension, and several nearby census tracts rank in the 90th to 100th percentile for environmental burdens. And within a 3-mile radius, there is a 9-year life expectancy gap tied to longstanding air and water quality challenges. And so with support from MEA, this project has allowed us to sort of push back against some of those contentions and create a more breathable community for a group of people that are already very much burdened by the negative impacts of our air system. Thanks.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Once again, Matt Stegman from the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. I think actually Delegate Spiegel did a really great job about saying a lot of the things that I was going to come here to say about the importance of the CEF generally and the way that that fund can be used as a major driver to make sure that we're meeting our climate resiliency goals and energy sustainability goals. We appreciate the way over the last couple of years this committee has been really thoughtful and deliberative about making the decision to take resources out of the CEF for other general fund purposes. So we would just ask you to please continue to be very thoughtful about that because it is a very important fund that does a lot of important work. And so thank you very much.
We appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon, and thank you for hearing my testimony. I'm Bruce Daggy. I'm a resident of Montgomery County, and I'm speaking in support of the Sierra Club proposal to use CEF funds to accelerate the rollout of heat pumps and induction cooktops. Somewhere in Maryland today, a leaking gas-powered water heater was replaced with a new gas-powered water heater. A leaking conventional electric water heater likewise wasn't upgraded to a heat pump model. And an old oil furnace was replaced by another fossil fuel unit, locking in higher energy costs, worse indoor air quality, and higher greenhouse gas emissions until about 2040. This is happening despite money-saving appliances being ready to deploy, and I'm speaking from experience. My wife and I bought our home in 2021. We had an energy audit, we fixed problems with the building envelope, we replaced incandescent bulbs, and we eliminated or upgraded inefficient appliances. Most recently, we replaced a broken central air conditioner with a cold climate heat pump, a far more efficient option than continuing to use baseboard resistance heaters in winter. Compared with the previous owners of the house, we've cut our electricity use by more than 10,000 kilowatt hours a year. That's an annual savings of more than 2,000 after-tax dollars every year. And we replaced a propane cooktop with induction. Our indoor air quality has never been better. Our electric bills are now low enough that rooftop solar might meet our annual usage, or at least we could meet 5 to 10% of our needs by adding balcony solar once that's approved in Maryland. We could afford the upfront costs of the changes that we made, but not everyone is so fortunate. A $40 relief check would be pocket change when what is needed is step change, especially for LMI households and renters. Please, this year and going forward, see to it that CEF funds are used as intended. And if I could say one last thing, my town, Washington Grove, believes that accelerating the clean energy transition is so important that it created its own incentive program. Residents who replace a fossil fuel HVAC system with a heat pump or who buy an electric vehicle and who also sign up for community solar qualify for a $1,500 check from the town. The program and the discussions it raised have contributed to an estimated 17% reduction in greenhouse emissions in the town since 2021. And about a quarter of the town now has community solar or rooftop solar. We have the solutions we need. Let's do it. Thank you.
Thank you. That's really, those are impressive statistics about your town. What's the name of the town again?
Washington Grove, it's near Gaithersburg,
And what's the population?
about 600.
Very good. Very good. Well, good work there. And thank you for being here today. That is everyone we have on our list. There isn't anyone I missed, I don't think. So we want to thank you very much and the Maryland Energy Administration for being here. We're moving on now to the Maryland Environmental Service, and we have Mr. Quist with us to begin that analysis. And then we have Dr. Charles Glass with us, who can come forward at his leisure. Mr. Quist, you may proceed.
Thank you. Good afternoon. The Maryland Environmental Service is a non-budgeted instrumentality of the state, which conducts a variety of environmentally related services for its clients. On page 1 of the analysis is data from the MES Fiscal 25 financial statements and reports, and shows that the total net asset position increased by $1.2 million in fiscal 2025 to a net asset valuation of $31.9 million. Operating income also increased by a net $569,000. On page 2, Exhibit 1 shows a breakdown of the MES fiscal 2025 revenue sources. Revenues totaled $226.2 million. You can see in the pie chart about 95% of revenues came from state and local government sources. On page 3, Exhibit 2 shows a breakdown of fiscal 25 revenues by business activity type. This pie chart shows that the largest categories of revenues came from environmental dredging and restoration, recycling, and wastewater operations. On page 4, Exhibit 3 shows data of revenues by business activity type over the 5-year period. You can see from this chart that revenues increased by about $8 million in fiscal 2025, with the largest increases in revenues being in the categories of recycling, water, wastewater operations, and dredging. On page 6 of the analysis, Exhibit 4, this shows an overview of fiscal 27 budget data from the budget books. Fiscal 27 allowance is approximately $230 million, or an increase of $10.9 million from the fiscal 26 appropriation. Of this increase, about $4.1 million is related to salary and personnel costs, and $6.9 million is related to other operating expenses. Page 7, Exhibit 5 shows a breakdown of reimbursable projects by state agency in the fiscal 27 allowance. MES has 2 main arrangements that it has with state agencies for conducting projects. Reimbursable projects are included in the budget allowance and are pursuant to a Board of Public Works directive that MES operate water and wastewater facilities for state agencies. There are also contractual projects, which MES has contracts with state agencies for conducting a project with them. For reimbursable projects, these total about $37.6 million in fiscal 27, and you can see on page 7 that the majority, about 74%, are for Department of Public Service and Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services institutions, followed by the DNR at about 12%. On page 8, Exhibit 6 shows a similar breakdown for the contractual projects. Fiscal 25 contractual project revenue from state agencies totaled about $85 million. You can see here that the majority of contractual project revenue came from the Maryland Department of Transportation. About 62% was from the Maryland Port Administration, supporting the Port Administration's dredged material management program and related activities there. On page 9, there's a summary of the MES personnel data. The fiscal 27 allowance supports about 810 positions. MES has a dynamic workforce, and actual personnel needs can vary from year to year depending on actual business needs and contracts for different projects. Under the key observations section of the analysis, starting on page 10, is a discussion of data from the MES annual funding statement. Committee narrative requested in the 2025 Joint Chairman's Report, and has also been included in the past several years, requesting an annual funding statement from MES, which asks for some various financial data to inform the production of the DLS analysis. On page 10, Exhibit 7 shows the MES undesignated unrestricted net assets per year, which are essentially fund balance, which are available to cover needed expenditures as they may arise. As shown in Exhibit 7, the undesignated unrestricted net position in fiscal 25 was $5.4 million, which was a decrease of about $400,000 from the previous year. Exhibit 8 on page 11 shows the MES overhead rates by work category. Overhead rates are general or administrative rates charged to clients for conducting different projects. You can see that over the years, overhead rates remain roughly stable. However, there are decreases from fiscal 25 to the fiscal 27 projected rates in the areas of environmental operations, water and wastewater, general and administrative. On page 12 and 13, Exhibit 9, there's data on MES project reserve fund balances. MES has 3 reserved funds which are established through statute, which allow the agency to retain funding, to have flexibility for completing projects in the case that there are changes in scope or cost without necessitating further delay with allowing funds to be available for those costs. These include the State Reimbursable Project Contingency Fund, the Eastern Correctional Institution Steam Turbine Contingency Fund, and the DNR Project Contingency Fund. MES utilized and plans to utilize those funds by withdrawing funding from the State Reimbursable Project Fund in fiscal 25 and retaining and withdrawing funds from the Eastern Correctional Institution Steam Turbine Contingency Fund in fiscal 25 and 26. On a related note, in the BRFA last year, there was a provision which increased the cap on the allowable retainage in the State Reimbursable Project Fund and the ECI Fund to their current levels. On page 14, for the DLS recommended actions, DLS is recommending the one piece of annual committee narrative requesting the submission of an MES funding statement with the budget submission. And that concludes the DLS presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Quist, we appreciate your thorough analysis, and now we will turn it over to Dr. Glass for any kind of response.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. For the record, my name is Dr. Charles Glass. I'm the Executive Director of MES. First, on behalf of MES, I would like to thank Mr. Samuel Quist and the entire DLS team for their thorough analysis of both our operating and capital budgets. The DLS analysis includes a recommendation again this year, similar to prior budget years, that the committees require MES to continue to provide an annual funding statement to DBM through the next budget development process. MES, of course, as in prior years, concurs with this recommendation. I wanted to take one more minute if I can.
Of course.
We have a current vacancy rate of 4.52% as of February 26, but our 12-month rolling average for the prior fiscal year was 3.75%. I reported last year that our summer internship program led to us to create a rotational fellowship, a 2-year program for 1 engineer and 1 environmental specialist to go through and rotate through all of our operating groups, our administrative group, and our executive group. And the 2 young women that are doing that program are absolutely fantastic. And impressive pedigrees, Georgetown and University of Maryland, College Park. And they're doing incredibly well after their almost first year of a few rotations. Our MBE numbers, in FY25, we recorded an MBE participation rate of 29.83% on $90 million. And so far to date, as a close of Q2, we're at 33.63% on $43 million. So we continue to strive to exceed the 29% goal. And I'm very proud to share with you that our continued success in the top workplaces in the Baltimore Sun, Washington Post, and USA Today. We are 38th in the Baltimore region, so now we focus on striving to get that number lower. So 5 years straight in the Baltimore Sun, 3 years straight in the Washington Post and USA Today. So Madam Chair, it's been a long road the last 5 years, 6 years, 5 years since I was confirmed, 6 years in the role. But I'm proud of the entire organization's success. To continue to be honored for 3 consecutive years by those periodicals is a testament to the 800+ employees at MES, state employees, even though we have a different personnel system. So, and lastly, as you know, but I want to make sure the rest of the subcommittee knows, we have completed the OLA audit of 2022 requests that we have agreements with all state agencies that we do business with. And so the last year, we had 2 outstanding. Those have been completed. And we're happy to report that all of our relationships with our other state agencies continue to thrive. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that report. You have really made so much progress with the agency, and just the vacancy rate is one metric, but in the 3% is probably the best we have in the state. You've done a terrific job. We're super glad that those memorandums of understanding are in place with each state agency, because when we first met you, I don't know if there were any, but you were able to put them in place, and that's always helpful to us when we have problems, be able to look back at that agreement and say, how should it work and what should it do? So you've done a fantastic job. We probably still have questions for you, though. Members, any questions? Delegate Harrison.
I just have, I think, really one question. Mr. Quist indicated that in last year's BRFA, there was a request to lift the cap on your funding, but the money really hasn't been spent. So can you address that? And because we can't just, times are tight, we can't just have money sitting there and not use it.
Thank you for the question, Delegate Harrison. So those are for particularly the ECI turbine overhaul budget. The reason we asked for those to be increased is just because over the 15 years since they had been established, the cost of a turbine overhaul had drastically increased. And so we replaced the turbine in one of the 2 turbines at ECI Correctional Institution, and we had to keep coming back for more because the price had basically doubled in that time frame. So now we have the funds in place for the second turbine to be completely overhauled. So with a capital project, sometimes with the planning, design, et cetera, investigation, it takes a few years. We've had that particular facility also change from burning wood chips to natural gas. That caused a lot of consternation. When I first started, it was really just in the first phases, but it wasn't scoped completely. So instead of saying we need $30 million, it came in pieces. So we try to avoid that, and so that we have a proper scoping of a design. The other, that contingency for the other state projects is for really probably between Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services and the other state facilities, Maryland Military, et cetera. It's for many plants. And so it's really, if there's a capital need that that basically ends up being closer to an emergency, we need the funds there to do replacements for things that are getting old. So it's really not an operational question, as this committee is. Those are generally for capital projects, which is why they sit for a longer amount of time.
Okay. It says here on page 12 that you're planning the overhaul for the second turbine. It's planned for fiscal 2026.
Yes.
We're almost at the end of fiscal 2026.
Yes.
What's the reality there?
That it will probably go into 27 as well, yes.
So do you have a time frame yet?
I can get back to you on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Glass, and we appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Next, we have MDOT Secretary's Office, and we have Secretary Thompson here, and we have Kelly Norton, who will begin with her analysis of the Secretary's Office budget. You may proceed.
Thank you, Chair. We're going to begin with page 1. We have the operating budget summary. The budget for fiscal 2027 increases to $167 million, a 23.3% increase compared to fiscal 2026. The pay-go capital budget summary is on page 2. The fiscal 2027 allowance increases to $87.4 million, or 23.4% from fiscal 2026. Exhibit 1 on page 5 shows the annual department-wide filled and vacant positions as of January 1st from 2017 to 2026. The number of filled positions grew in January 2026 compared to that time in the previous year. However, the vacancy rate also increased over that same period from 7.1% to 7.5%. The Spending Affordability Committee recommended that MDOT spend no less than $1.15 billion on system preservation. On page 6 is Exhibit 2, showing the system preservation funding. MDOT expects to spend $1.19 billion in fiscal 2026 and $1.39 billion in fiscal 2027. Chapter 605 of 2025 established the Department of Social and Economic Mobility, or DOSM. The department was created through the moving of functions from other agencies, including MDOT's Office of Minority Business Enterprise, or OMBE. This new department's creation led to the transfer of $4.4 million in special funds and 37 positions from MDOT to DOSM. MDOT will continue to fund OMBE through the Transportation Trust Fund. Section 21 of the fiscal 2026 budget bill added a total of $12.9 million to the appropriation for TSO, including $12.6 million to the capital program and $250,000 for the operating program. The agency should provide an update on the status of the use of these funds, including the status of grant agreements and distributions. The fiscal 2027 budget includes a proposed deficiency appropriation of $5.3 million in special funds to provide additional funding for software licenses, building maintenance and security, and employee onboarding and development. Exhibit 3 on page 8 shows the overview of agency spending in fiscal 2027. Technology services comprise 61% of the operating budget. 27% of agency spending is for departmental administration and 12% for operating grants and aid. Exhibit 4 on page 9 has the proposed budget and provides a breakdown of the areas of growth between fiscal 2026 and 2027. Fiscal 2027 increases $31.6 million over the 2026 working appropriation. Personnel expenses account for a $31 million increase from fiscal 2026 to 2027, with the largest portion being $28 million for salary increases and associated fringe benefits due to the transfer of 184 positions from the MDOT modes as part of an IT consolidation plan. Exhibit 5 on page 10 shows the operating grants and aid funding for fiscal 2027. There's a total of $20.8 million for the grants, the same amount as the fiscal 2026 working appropriation. Personnel data can be found on page 11. Regular positions increased by 184 from the fiscal 2026 work and appropriation. These positions were transferred to the Secretary's office as part of MDOT's efforts to consolidate IT operations. Moving to the 2026 Consolidated Transportation Program, or CTP, Exhibit 6 on page 12 shows the 6-year program capital spending from fiscal 2026 to 2031. The 6-year total is roughly $293 million, with 47% going towards major projects and an additional 47% for the minor program. On the next page, Exhibit 7 provides a list of projects in fiscal 2027. The fiscal 2027 allowance is $88.4 million. The largest project planned for the fiscal 2027 is the MDOT Solar Implementation Project with $40 million, followed by the minor program at $28.9 million. Exhibit 8 on page 14 has the capital cash flow changes from fiscal 2026 to 2027. Fiscal 2026 included $50 million from the Strategic Energy Investment Fund transferred from the dedicated purpose account for TSO's Solar Implementation Project. The Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act of 2025 authorizes expanded use of CEF for fiscal 2026 only, but the CTP shows much of this funding to be expended in fiscal 2027 and 2028. TSO should discuss the shifting of the timeline for use in the CTP given the authorization of the expanded use in fiscal 2026 only. Exhibit 9 on page 15 shows the cash flow changes from the fiscal 2026 allowance to the fiscal 2026 working appropriation. As you can see, the cost of major projects increased $19 million and the minor program increased $15.6 million for a total of roughly $35 million. TSO should provide an explanation on how the $12.6 million in legislative additions is being expended in the fiscal 2026 working appropriation. Exhibit 10 on page 16 shows the breakdown of cash flow changes from fiscal 2026 working appropriation to the fiscal 2027 allowance. Major projects increased $27 million and the minor program decreases $10.3 million, leading to an overall increase of $17.5 million in fiscal 2027. Exhibit 11 on page 17 shows the percentage of first-year funding and ongoing funding in fiscal 2027. Ongoing funding is $36.2 million, or 41% of the allowance, and first-year funding accounts for $52 million, or 59%. On pages 18 through 19, Exhibit 12 shows a breakdown of the first-year funding for fiscal 2026 and 2027. There's $14.5 million in first-year funding for fiscal 2026, and again, $52.2 million for fiscal 2027. Exhibit 13 on page 19 shows the major changes from the last CTP. 2 projects were added, the MDOT Solar Implementation Project and the statewide rail trespass study for a total cost of $51 million. The issue on the new federal rule for disadvantaged business enterprise program begins on page 20. In October 2025, the U.S. Department of Transportation issued a new interim final rule for its disadvantaged business enterprise program and the airport concession disadvantaged business enterprise program. The new rule removed the presumption of racial minorities, women as socially disadvantaged. Disadvantaged status is now determined on a case-by-case basis based on the submission of a personal narrative to prove social and economic disadvantage. This rule requires state DOTs to evaluate all currently certified DBEs under Unified Certification Programs, or UCP, based on the new definition, and for the DOTs to reset DBE goals based on the refocused UCPs. DBE certifications are handled by OMBE, which is under DOSM. An expedited procurement process was approved for the recertification process, and 2 vendors were awarded 6-month contracts in January 2026. TSO should comment on what are the next steps for MDOT once DOSM finishes the recertification process. On page 22 and 23 are the recommended actions, and they are to add annual language restricting operating grants and aid funding in the operating budget, and in the pay-go budget, add annual language limiting capital project and grant funding to the projects identified in the CTP. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that analysis, and we can go now to Madam Secretary for a response.
Good afternoon, Chair Watson and members of the committee. For the record, I'm Katie Thompson, Acting Secretary of Transportation. I'm joined today by Deputy Secretary Samantha Biddle. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today to discuss the budget of MDOT's Secretary's Office, and thank you to Kelly Norton for her work on the DLS analysis. Today, I'd like to briefly highlight 2 ongoing initiatives and 1 recent achievement by the department. You've heard a lot about IT consolidation during our past hearings. MDOT is a data-driven agency and is committed to protecting the data and technology that we rely on every day to run our transportation system and to secure our customer-sensitive data. As you've all heard already, in July 2025, the department consolidated all IT staff offices across the modes into one IT office at the Secretary's office. Currently, about 270 employees are now working together to successfully maintain MDOT's IT network and provide IT services. MDOT's IT consolidation efforts are creating a unified team that can holistically focus on the department's needs, such as discontinuing the use of obsolete legacy software and hardware and reducing the number of data centers our team maintains, thereby mitigating associated risks. These efforts allow MDOT to better leverage our resources and deploy best practices across the entire department. Turning to apprenticeships, MDOT is also working to grow the state's workforce and address the critical need for more skilled trade workers, as many projects across Maryland are now competing for a limited labor pool. At the MTA budget hearing, we talked about the incredible bus maintenance apprenticeship program that was developed in partnership with ATU Local 1300 and the Community College of Baltimore County. MDOT is also working in partnership with the Federal Highway Administration and the Maryland Department of Labor to initiate the $24 million Road to Careers program. Now in its second year, the program provides funds to eligible partners to develop skilled workers in the transportation construction industry. The program supports registered apprenticeships, pre-apprenticeships, and integrated education models. To date, MDOT has awarded $4 million through the program and anticipates training and supporting 1,200 Marylanders in the first award round. This is a great program, and we look forward to continuing to expand its reach. Lastly, I want to take a moment to recognize a recent milestone achieved by the department. Each year, the department prepares its annual comprehensive financial report detailing the financial activities of the department in the prior fiscal year. This report is prepared in accordance with government accounting standards and is audited by an independent certified public accounting firm. MDOT's fiscal year 2025 report received an unmodified or clean opinion, which means there were no material misstatements or errors. It demonstrates MDOT's longstanding commitment to strong internal control and financial management framework. In addition, each year, MDOT submits the report for review by the Government Finance Officers Association. For the 25th year in a row, MDOT was recently awarded the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. This milestone reflects MDOT's commitment to financial disclosure and transparency. Turning to the DLS analysis, the department concurs with both recommendations from the analysis. We prepared written responses to the questions in the analysis, and we are happy to provide any additional information or answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to begin? Delegate Edelson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Great to see you both. This might actually be more of a question for our analysts, but I'll pose it just so I can make sure I fully understand. Under Chapter 605, OMBE was transferred to DOSIM.
He's referencing page 6.
Apologies, page 6 of the DLS analysis. But I mean, that's the case. Under Chapter 605, OMBE is now at DOSIM. DOSIM being the Department of Social and Economic Mobility. At the time, am I correct that the amount of TTF funding going into OMBE was about 4.4 million, but now it has increased to 6.7 million, and that money is still coming from the TTF?
I see what you're referring to. I don't know, yeah, it's this one here, but I don't know what accounts for the increase in the 2.3 million.
I believe it's an increase because it's not the full fiscal year for the 4.4 million, if I'm not mistaken.
So was it 6.7 million per fiscal year that was going to OMBE previously out of the TTF? And so that number is just matching what was in previous fiscal? Because I understand what you're saying is prorated, So it's 4.4 million for a period of the year, but would that mean that the number actually has stayed the same or it has increased?
That might be a question for MDOT as far as
Okay.
exactly.
It is increased.
Okay, so we're now funding 6.7 million annually into the Department of Social and Economic Mobility from the TTF.
Jacqueline Hartman, Assistant Secretary of Transportation Investments. Yes, the bill that created DOSM required that the Transportation Trust Fund continue to fund the operations of the Office of Minority Business Enterprise only. So not all of DOSM's operations, but specific for that office that used to be at MDOT.
And whatever amount is budgeted for that office is still going to come out of the TTF every year. So if next year the allowance is 15 million for that office, that means 15 million is going to be coming out of the TTF to go into the Department of Social and Economic Mobility.
Correct. The bill creating DOSM did not set any limits on that amount.
Understood. Thank you.
So Delegate Edelson and Kelly, what would you propose that we do in order to track what that money is every year and is being spent on every year, as it is not an agency that comes to us, but it is money that comes out of the TTF? Right?
Yeah.
I would think that MDOT would be able to provide that number to, since you're transferring that fund to DOSM, I would assume you're tracking that, so they could get that.
I think that's less of the issue than, I mean, the money's in the budget, so we should be able, the Office of Budget Management should be able to tell us how much money's going there, but the question is, what are they doing with it? And that, do you have access to that? Are you aware of their efforts?
We are generally aware of their efforts, the program that they're standing up and the recertification process that they have to do, but I don't think we have a really granular understanding of exactly how the money is being spent.
So that would be in whose budget? In
DOSM? Be in DOSM.
And what subcommittee does that fall under? Public safety. Okay. I think we answered our own questions. We'll follow up on that, maybe with public safety.
I do have just one follow-up if I can, which is that, do you have a sense on historically, I know we could go back and look at this, but approximately how much of MDOT's budget was allocated to the Office of Minority and Business Enterprise? Like, was it typically around 4.4 million a year that was going into that office, and now all of a sudden it's increased to 6.7?
We do have historical records, and I'll let Jacqueline respond to the details.
So previously, some of the funding was spread into our capital budget as well, like for the disparity study. Excuse me. Roughly $5.5 million per year on average.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Spiegel?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good to see you all again. Since we just had the Maryland Energy Administration hearing and quite a conversation about the SEIF, I just wanted to see if you all wanted to give us an update on the $50 million allocation for MDOT to be deploying solar at your facilities and properties over the next several months, especially since also there was a Maryland Matters profile article about it yesterday or today.
Oh, you saw that, okay.
I did. It's all very positive news. I'm very supportive, but I just wanted to see if you all had any updates in terms of operationally how it's going to be rolled out and how long it's going to take.
I'll speak just at a high level and then turn it over to the Deputy Secretary, but we are poised to move forward. We are very excited to be able to leverage our own properties and facilities to install solar that will generate electricity in an efficient, cost-effective way, and be able to use that ourselves or sell it to the grid. But I'll turn it over to the Deputy Secretary for additional details.
Certainly, thanks for the question and for the interest. I think just for clarification on how it's reflected in the analysis and how it is then reflected in both our operating and in our CTP. So there was the one-time cash transfer of the $50 million, and then we have updated our CTP to demonstrate and provide transparency on how we anticipate those funds will be expended fiscal year by fiscal year. So there is a bit of a ramp up, but we have 5 photovoltaic systems currently installed at facilities, and we're actively working to expand that number. We have a great team and a great partnership. As the Secretary mentioned, certainly looking to utilize and build upon lessons learned for those existing implementations, but we know there's a lot of opportunity out there.
Thank you. And so just to be clear, that 50 million is for the multi-year effort. That's not 50 million per year?
Correct.
Yeah.
I believe we have just about 500,000 programmed in 26, 40 million programmed in 27, and the remaining 9.5 million programmed in 28.
Great, thank you. Just a couple other quick questions and points. We all have discussed the ongoing issues with deficiencies, and I won't belabor the point, but I'll just note the proposed deficiency of $5.3 million, which is in the DLS analysis is mentioned there. And I had kind of a technical question about operating budget recommended actions. This may also be a question for the analyst and not for the agency, but I'll ask you both. On page 22 of the analysis is the specific language, which I guess is used every year. It's pretty standard language, but I thought it was interesting that it said that operating grants and aid were limited under the second subpart there. They're limited except for any proposed increase either to provide funds for a new grantee or to increase funds for an existing grantee. Wouldn't that be basically covering every situation in which there would be an exception? Am I missing something there?
I don't think you're missing anything there. That's the standard annual language.
Okay, all right. I mean, it's limited by that next paragraph that talks about the need to provide a justification, but I just thought that was kind of interesting drafting, and I wasn't sure if there was a reason why we word it that way, but it's, right. Thank you. That's all I got.
I have just one question and follow-up to Delegate Spiegel's question on the solar at the MDOT facilities. Will that be across the state, or is it concentrated? How do you envision that? Because I did see the article as well, although I didn't get an opportunity to read it as I was reading across America
What we're
with
doing
elementary schools.
is evaluating sort of all of our facilities to see which ones might be most suitable, that we are not looking, in a limited geographic area. We will look at all of our facilities across the state, and through the selection process or down selecting, identify those most suited for the $50 million that we currently have.
Okay. I'm just trying to, I thought it was just intriguing because we did have the halt on the wind turbines, but we know that we're still in a crisis. And so I thought that it's great that we're looking at this and trying to mitigate some of the issues. So I was just wondering where they may be.
And we'll make those selections later this year. I'm not sure the date, but I think towards the end of the year.
Yeah, we can certainly follow up with your office. Thank you for the interest.
Thank you. We want to thank you for your work on the Joint Chairman report, the 3 reports that came out of your office. Following up on one of them, the reorganization of transit service, that work group worked very hard, came up with a proposal, which was not what they initially thought it would be, but it sounds like everyone is on the same page now, and that legislation will be moving forward this session, at least in the House. The second one was on the Purple Line Security Cooperation. We did get that, and we did discuss that with you, with the MTA, and we know that there were ongoing discussions. You don't have to address this now, but we do need to hear back from someone with regard to where that stands pretty soon.
Yes, we understand. We continue to have ongoing discussions, and we know we need to wrap it up soon to address your
or at least give us a plan of action that involves a longer timeline that we can work with.
Yes, we will do that.
Also, we have in here one of our least favorite things, a proposed efficiency appropriation. And it is $5.3 million in special funds for the increased cost for software licenses, $4.3 million, building maintenance and security, $416,000, and employee onboarding development, $535,000. The question we are asking each agency is, why do we have this deficiency? Are these costs that you could not anticipate, or was there some other mitigating factor that caused this to be basically over budget?
Yeah, thank you for your question, Chairman Watson. I'll let Ms. Hartman answer, but the answer, basically, the answer is we're following the DBM guidance as to how we categorize these, but we can address the specific items.
Thank you. So I think the deficiencies that we have generally fall into two categories. One, as we have been working towards the IT consolidation across the department, we are seeing opportunities for savings, and we're also seeing opportunities where we have not done the same best practices across the entire department. So a large part of the deficiencies at TSO is really related to software licenses and ramping up some of our cybersecurity efforts so that they're more uniform across the department, as well as for a couple of our software licenses that we had, ensuring that we have enough licenses for all users. So I think that's nearly $4 million of our total amount. In addition, there are some amounts for really just kind of identifying needs that have come up throughout the year. And as we were putting together our fiscal 27 budget, recognizing that some of those increased funding needs that we had in fiscal 27 really exist in fiscal 26 as well. So trying to use the budget process to provide that funding in fiscal 26 as well. In that category falls some additional building security measures that we're taking at the MDOT headquarters office, some additional contractor support positions in our Office of Homeland Security. So really just kind of responding to the changing needs that we're seeing throughout the year.
Okay, and the software licenses, we had that come up in another of MDOT's agency, I forget which one, the port,
Yes.
maybe. So that was a similar situation?
Yes.
Where there was an audit done by the provider, or is this because you knew that could be a possibility, you were proactive about identifying the fact that you needed more software licenses?
The port case was a little bit unique in that we didn't have enough licenses, as you remember well, as we did that reconciliation part with the contractor. We recognized we did not have enough licenses. For the other ones, a lot of the other ones that we're seeing at TSO is really ensuring that we have expanded, like there are some cybersecurity programs that maybe we had at some of our modal administrations, but not all of them. So ensuring that we can provide the same support across all of our modes. So in those, it really is additional licenses. And then in one case, there was also a negotiation of a contract renewal that increased our cost that was unanticipated.
Appreciate that explanation. As you know, we're just getting a lot of deficiencies across the board, not just MDOT, but pretty much all agencies, and we're trying to get a handle on how we can better control them so that we don't start the budget year in the negative as a body. So we appreciate your feedback on that. Another point, I believe that we do not yet have an answer from MAA on their situation, and I know that it will be coming to us momentarily, but I wanted to mention that.
Yes, thank you.
Because I think that is almost late. Members, anything else on TSO? Okay, we appreciate all that you're doing, and we thank you for your efforts. And we have now, you probably stay right there, we have MVA, and Kelly is going to take us through the analysis, and I believe we have Christine Nizer here as well.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead. Ms. Norton.
Thank you. We're going to begin with page 1. We have the operating budget summary. The budget for fiscal 2027 increases to $268 million, up 1.3% from fiscal 2026. The pay-go capital budget summary is on page 2. The fiscal 2027 allowance decreases to $20.1 million, or 25% from fiscal 2026. Moving on to managing for results. MVA's goal is to have alternative service delivery transactions, such as self-service kiosk and online transactions, as 85% of all of its transactions. Exhibit 1 on page 5 shows the ASD transactions as a percentage of all transactions from fiscal 2016 to 2025. You can see in the chart that the percentage continues to increase, reaching 80.9% in fiscal 2025. On page 6 is Exhibit 2, showing the average cost per MVA transaction, which grew to just over $19 in fiscal 2025 from $16.84 in fiscal 2024. MVA should explain why the average cost per transaction increased in fiscal 2025. Exhibit 3 on page 7 shows the average customer wait and visit times. Since moving to an appointment-only system during the pandemic, wait times have decreased overall. Customers with wait times under 10 minutes was 81% in fiscal 2025, and the average wait time increased slightly to 6 minutes. Average customer visit time increased to 26 minutes. MVA should explain why the customer visit time increased in fiscal 2025. The fiscal 2027 budget includes a proposed efficiency appropriation of $2.4 million in special funds to provide additional funding for credit card processing fees, postage, law enforcement, and materials required for license plates, driver's licenses, and ID cards. MVA should explain the need for this proposed efficiency. Exhibit 4 on page 8 shows the overview of agency spending fiscal 2027. Driver and vehicle services comprise 37% of the operating budget. 34% of agency spending is on administration and 14% on central operations. The remaining spending is on the Vehicles Emissions Inspection Program, the Maryland Highway Safety Office, and motorcycle safety and insurance compliance. Exhibit 5 on page 9 presents the proposed budget and provides a breakdown of growth areas between fiscal 2026 and 2027. Fiscal 2027 increases by $3.4 million over the 2026 working appropriation. Personnel expenses increased by $3.6 million, mostly driven by a $7.4 million increase in employee and retiree health spending, partially offset by a $3.7 million decrease in regular earnings due to the transfer of IT positions to TSO and the abolition of positions as part of the BPW reduction. Increased spending in other areas such as registration stickers and advertising is offset by decreases in other areas, resulting in an overall increase of only $3.4 million. Personnel data can be found on page 10. Regular positions decreased by 67 from the fiscal 2026 working appropriation. These positions were transferred to the Secretary's office as part of MDOT's efforts to consolidate IT operations. The 2026 Consolidated Transportation Program information begins on page 11, sorry. Exhibit 6 on page 11 shows the 6-year program capital spending from fiscal 2026 to 2031. The 6-year total is roughly $104 million, with 94% going towards the minor program. Since MVA's fiscal 2027 allowance is 96% minor program, Exhibit 7 on the next page provides the minor project funding by investment category for fiscal 2027. Most spending for the minor program is on system preservation at $17.5 million. The remaining is for expansion/efficiency, environment, and safety and security. The cost recovery issue is on page 13, beginning fiscal 2026. The BRFA of 2025 required the MVA to set miscellaneous fees to recover at least 100%, but not exceed 105% the sum of the MVA operating budget, the average annual capital program for MVA in the 6-year CTP, and MVA's portion of the costs for the budget year of MDOT's data center operations. Exhibit 8 shows MVA's cost recovery rate from fiscal 2025 through 2031. MVA is on track to meet the new standards from fiscal 2026 through 2028. As of now, MVA expects to fall below the minimum recovery rate in fiscal 2029 and will need to raise fees to meet the minimum recovery rate. On page 14 are the recommended actions. They are to concur with the governor's allowance for the operating and pay-go budgets. An update on real IDs on page 15, and that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. And who is going to begin?
I will begin. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Watson and members of the committee. For the record, I'm Katie Thompson, Acting Secretary of Transportation. I'm joined this afternoon by Motor Vehicle Administration Administrator Chrissy Nizer. We appreciate the opportunity to testify today. Thank you again to Kelly Norton for her work on MVA's budget analysis. At the MVA, Administrator Nizer and her team have remained committed to premier customer service, optimizing branch wait times and improving the customer experience through MVA's Customer Connect program. Further, under the Moore-Miller administration, MDOT is serious about safety, and with the support of MVA, we've made historic investments in roadway safety. The Maryland Highway Safety Office, housed at the MVA, is dedicated to saving lives and preventing injuries by reducing motor vehicle crashes through the administration of a comprehensive network of traffic safety programs. In 2025, the number of roadway fatalities fell to under 500, which is the lowest annual count since 1960. The significant reduction in fatalities, particularly among vulnerable road users, reflects the administration's targeted investment in high-risk corridors, accelerating quick-build safety improvement programs, and actively addressing high speeds near work sites. These commitments will continue into 2026 and beyond, with the governor's budget continuing to maintain record funding for the safety of our transportation network. Now I'll turn it over to Administrator Neiser to provide some additional information and address the DLS analysis.
Thank you, Acting Secretary Thompson. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. It's my honor to be before you again. Again, for the record, Chrissy Neiser, Motor Vehicle Administrator. Again, I want to add my thanks to Kelly Norton for her budget review. And as the Secretary indicated, across the state, our employees are really focused on delivering that premier customer experience. We are incredibly proud of our 99.5% awesome customer satisfaction rating. And we're really trying to reimagine that MBA branch experience even before you walk through those doors. In 2025, with transparency in mind, we launched the online data dashboard that empowers our customers with real-time information into branch operations, including our wait times and a detailed listing of services, which includes services for other agencies that I'll touch on briefly. As was highlighted in the DLS analysis, MBA maintained historic low average wait time of 5 minutes for 2 years in a row. In addition, we are focused on safeguarding our customers' information with our mobile ID program. During your next visit to MBA, you can actually use your personal mobile ID to check in for that appointment at one of our self-service kiosks. We have more than 300,000 Marylanders now have added that to their smartphone. And with the Major League Baseball season starting shortly, we're proud that we're the first, actually, franchise that has a partnership with the Orioles to use the MDL to do alcoholic purchases at the stadium. So you can also use it there now. The state of Maryland is truly leading and really leaning into the idea of customer privacy. In terms of accessibility, it's another important priority for the Moore-Miller administration. And one of the ways we've done that is including additional languages in our Maryland driver's manual. We've just added Haitian Creole to the over 15 different languages that are available. And in addition, we've rewritten our manuals and much of our website into plain language, really yielded great results with our non-commercial test. And so now we have gotten grant funding to do our commercial driver's license manual. That just went live on the website. And shortly we'll be launching the questions in plain language. We are hopeful that that same great result we saw with our non-commercial passage rate increase will be there with a commercial driver's license test, which obviously is so important to get more individuals into the trucking industry. Also like to give an update on Eric's Law, which the legislature passed last year about hidden disabilities. We now have, since October 25, over 13,000 customers that added that to their license or ID card, and that obviously is our first responders, a great mechanism to communicate to them that there may be some special needs in that circumstance. We are continuing to celebrate our one-stop shop approach to government services to have multiple agencies within the MBA branch offices. We expanded our partnership with the Maryland Department of Veterans and Military Families in Waldorf and Annapolis, and more locations are coming soon. And just last week, we opened our first co-located office with the Baltimore City Department of Social Services that provides residents with access to SNAP benefits, temporary cash assistance, and medical assistance. So really proud of our first local partnership and hopefully more to come. By leveraging those state facilities, we are saving other agencies about $4 million, according to our calculations. In addition, we've expanded our traditional MBA services. For example, we've offered a new driver test course in Garrett County. That means those residents do not have to travel down to Cumberland now, which is about a 45-minute drive, saving them and allowing them to take the test in their community. Online is also obviously an area of focus. My MBA has over 60 different transactions. We have 2 million customers with those accounts, but certainly continue to encourage customers to go to mba.maryland.gov to do that. As was indicated, we are operating in that appointments environment. At the end of 2025, about 70% of customers experienced a wait time below 5 minutes and 97% below 20 minutes. Over 58,000 customers were serviced with a same-day appointment. So they walked in, didn't have an appointment, we were able to provide that service same day. The Secretary certainly talked about highway safety, and it is a major focus of ours. We are really excited about the results from last year in terms of the reduction that we saw in fatalities, but we know there is still more work to be done as long as there is one fatality out there. But in particular, those vulnerable roadway user gains are, substantial and something that we are going to continue to lean into with her leadership and the Serious About Safety initiative. We're looking for new and innovative ways to make a difference in prioritizing the safety of all roadway users. We are continuing to work with local jurisdictions to develop strategic highway safety plans, and so we are a resource certainly and wanting to work with the locals and see how we can partner to reach that common goal. Before I conclude, I just want to say that I always have to acknowledge the great work of our employees. We don't accomplish anything without them, and so it's important to lift them up. I'll now turn to the budget analysis, starting on page 5 with the cost per transaction. I will say that there was a misprint in terms of that cost per transaction, making it look like there was a more substantial increase. We were able to get that corrected, and we do regret the discrepancy in making the appearance that it increased more than it did. On the second issue, we should explain why customer visit time increased in fiscal year 25. First, because there's a lot of terminology, I just want to say visit time includes your wait time, so how long you wait before you go up, your transaction time, and how long it takes for that whole session. So if you do more than one thing, if you take a driving test, all of those are included in there. One of the things we've really been focused on, because our wait time is 5 minutes, is looking at what other issues the customer might need to take care of while they're there to take good use of their time. So we have been encouraging customers to see if you came in for a driver license appointment, if you have a vehicle issue that maybe we could assist you with at the same time. And so we believe we're doing a good job, even though that total visit time may have increased, the wait time is still 5 minutes. I want to encourage us to take advantage of, again, we know time is precious, and so while that customer is there, let's take advantage of all the things that we can help them with for that premier experience. And next, the question is related to item 3 on page 7, the deficiencies. The largest shortfall is obviously related to those credit card processing fees and postage fees. Obviously, there were fee increases. The way the banking contract works for the state, it is a percentage. So as fees increase, therefore the credit card fees increased. We also offered for the first time 1-year registrations as an initial option that had not been offered in the past. And so obviously there's impact downstream from that. That was just not something we anticipated when the budget was originally constructed. I will certainly say that we are always looking for cost savings, and I think we've been pretty successful in that over the years. We continue to do that to find ways to offset, frankly, many things that we can't control, like postage increases. And so we concur in terms of the analysis of the cost recovery, the governor's operating analysis, and the PAYGO analysis. With that, certainly happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. And I will say that I smiled a little bit when I saw the recommendation that you comment on the increase of 1.2 minutes or something on your wait time or your service time or whatever the metric was, because we know how much MVA has improved over the years and how hard your staff has worked to do that. And we still get, it's one of the agencies we get a lot of positive feedback from our constituents on the service level. So we thank you for that. And we know once you get to the top, they're always going to be shooting for you. So just take it with a grain of salt. We understand that your service is still very, very good. And I'll start with Delegate Metzger, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, ladies, for being here. What a privilege it is. And I will concur with the time factor. I recently had to get my own driver's license renewed. And just for curiosity's sake, the gentleman was in front of me. I just kind of watched. And he was in and out just a matter of minutes. And he had the same. So it was really good.
That's great.
Just to do that. But I have a question. The question I have, the increase in a budget of $3.4 million in the physical budget, with the increase of tags, with the increase of emissions, why that much increase?
Certainly. So MBA, certainly the fees that we collect go into the Transportation Trust Fund, which is then used to fund many things. We certainly get some capital expenditures back that we use on things like our IT systems or our branch offices. So while the fees were increased, that went to fund projects through the Transportation Trust Fund. The additional costs that you see are because the tags increase, right? The cost of the material for MCE increase, and they just pass that cost along to us. Again, that was not something we're aware of as we put the budget together. We certainly plan for certain increases, but certain things we're just not aware of.
That's a good answer, but the consumer outside doesn't know anything about transportation trust funds and this cost and that cost. They know that when they went into to get their tags, it had doubled. And when they went to the emissions, it had doubled. And let me just ask you this, and it'll kind of simplifies it. How can I answer my constituents when they say, Rick, my tag went from 125 for 2 years to 275 or 300 for a year? How do I answer that?
Certainly happy to provide you some of the information because believe me, we get letters from constituents all the time on this very issue. So happy to provide you some follow-up information that we do use in terms of, obviously there are critical projects in every community that are used with the funding that the legislature raised with the support of the governor last year. But we also have tried to do things as an organization to make it a little easier, recognizing we have sympathy for the customers and costs of everything going up. And so that's one of the reasons that we did offer that 1-year vehicle registration without having to ask for it. You probably remember you used to have to go into the branch and ask for that. That is an option up front. The legislature also gave us the authority for customers to request a payment plan. That is another option where you pay 6 months up front and they will send you a reminder and then you pay the second half of your vehicle registration fee. So we've tried in every way that we can to make it a little more palatable. We still on the vehicle emissions do have the self-service kiosks where you get a little bit of a discount, but we certainly are very sympathetic to the fact that these are real costs for our customers and we recognize that.
The same metal you buy your plates from is the same metal that everybody else buys them from.
Exactly.
And the struggle that I have, excuse me, Madam Chair, but is that I have friends in Florida and Pennsylvania and Ohio and Kentucky, and there's anywhere from $35 a year to $125, and we're out of hand. We've got to figure out a way. Just saying. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So I will just jump in and just remind everyone that the decisions on those fees were made by the General Assembly because of our declining gas tax revenue to fund the Transportation Trust Fund. So in order to fund the highways and the bridges and the transit, we had to make up the difference in the lost revenue because the gas tax is declining. And so that was one way that the General Assembly decided to do it. I'm very happy about the 1 year, breaking it up into 1 year. We took advantage of that. And some of the other things that you're doing. Has your call volume increased with questions about those fees?
We've gotten a lot of questions about the fees, a lot of letters coming in to the Secretary's office, to our office directly. So we do have standard language, and we're happy to provide that to the committee. It does talk about all the things that the funding goes towards. We've also, of course, there's now the electric vehicle fee, and there's sometimes questions about that and the policy of the state on that. So we talk about how that is a substitute for the gas tax that would otherwise be paid.
It is a transition. Yes, it's transition that people are not aware of, that it's making up for the declining gas tax. So it's a challenge, but we appreciate what you're doing to help educate people. I'm going to turn it over now to Delegate Edelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Great to see you both. Thank you for all your work. A couple quick questions. One, any update on the VEAP vendor contract?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question. So we did execute that contract in the fall of last year. Just over the recent holiday weekend, we went live with real-time verification in the system. So this is great because you may have had constituents question that why Do I go to the Veep station? My information's not updated real time. It's all part of the MBA. Well, as of a few weeks ago, it is now real time updated in the system. And so that was the first real big rollout. We'll be doing some additional system enhancements coming up in April, and that will be followed by additional self-service kiosks that will be available. It's been incredibly popular. 19% of tests are done that way now. We're the highest in the country in terms of self-service, and so we're going to be increasing the accessibility. So more to come on that. We'll provide the locations as available.
Great, thank you, great work. In the 2025 BRFA, we increased the minimum cost recovery from 95% to 100% with a maximum of no more than 105. For the next few years, those numbers look pretty good. I'm curious if you can help us understand why the cost recovery percentage dropped so significantly in the out years.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that as we move towards the out years, the costs are a lot harder to anticipate. Yeah. Those are numbers that we look at not on an annual basis, but throughout the year. And so I think that as we get closer, we'll be able to give the legislature more accurate information. Okay. I'm not currently concerned that we are going to be in a position where we need to raise fees. But again, we continue to look at that data on a regular basis, along with the Secretary's office.
Look forward to working with you as those numbers become more clear. And then finally, if I may, Madam Chair, last year there was some legislation passed in partnership with your administration and the General Assembly on expanding the options for international drivers looking to get their Maryland licenses and the types of courses that could be provided in the 3-hour training, expanding just from drug and alcohol to more things. I'm just curious how the passage of that legislation, I know it's relatively recent, but have there been any changes in the way that you provide that 3-hour course and any responses from folks who are taking those courses and how they're receiving them?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question and your leadership on that policy issue. So we weren't, for those who aren't aware, able to talk about very important safety issues as part of that curriculum. And we all know that different countries have different rules in terms of driving on one side of the road versus another, what signs are, all those things. So we now have added that content to the curriculum. It's been updated. And I will also say that this is an issue that came to us from our driver's license examiners. And so they really felt validated that the legislature had seen to update the statute to add those provisions that they were seeing as a challenge as customers were coming to take their road test. So thank you so much for that.
Of course. Hopefully that makes it safer for everybody on the road and more quality content.
That's the goal.
Great.
Delegate Harrison.
Thank you. I wanted to, on page 16, we were talking, it's the appendix on the Joint Chairman's report and the new process that you have for identifying uninsured drivers or uninsured vehicles, I should say. Are you finding that there are more and more drivers or vehicles that are uninsured? And if so, do you think that it's associated with the rising cost of insurance? And do you identify at all in your report whether these vehicles had previously been insured by traditional insurance or MAVE?
Can I just verify, are you speaking of the JCR report that you all submitted? Is that which report you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Yes, so we did implement a new program where the companies are required to provide that full book of business and then real-time data verification as well. We did find that there were some vehicles that we had listed insurance on, but that insurance was no longer valid. And it was some legacy cases, so we were able to identify that and ensure that those vehicles had updated insurance. In terms of the rate itself, there has not been tremendous fluctuation in the rate of uninsured in terms of how we can calculate it. We calculate it based on those cases created where a payment is ultimately made. Sometimes a case is created and it was just an issue of not having the proper timing of receiving the information from the insurance company, so we calculate the insurance rate based on somebody making a payment. And so that rate has been around 5%. Pretty consistently over the last 5 to 10 years. So we haven't seen a tremendous increase in that rate, but we recognize that there are other challenges out there, not only cost of insurance, there's car ownership and other things. So it is something that we're actively monitoring, which is why that real-time verification that we've implemented as part of it is a great tool that not only can help us, but potentially other agencies as well.
Yeah, because I thought that I was told, and perhaps I misunderstood, that MVA was finding that more and more vehicles were not insured, and it was possibly because of the cost. The cost of insurance has just gone up for everyone, including what the insurer of last resort, which is already high, and so. The concern that I have, and I'm sure any of us who drive, are individuals who are uninsured and they're, being some sort of a catastrophe, and there being a problem there. So I was just curious more than anything else.
It may have come up in the context of the out-of-state tag situation, which currently I know the legislature, the policy committees are looking at Virginia tags in particular and maybe potential action that we need to take there. We certainly, as we look at, because we've partnered with our colleagues in Virginia to get data on Marylanders, people with a Maryland address that have a vehicle registered in Virginia. When we do an analysis of the zip codes there does seem to be a correlation with areas in which insurance rates are high, predominantly in the Baltimore City area, areas of Prince George's County, where also we know, just based on other data, that insurance rates are high. That being said, insurance isn't the only factor. We also know that in some cases these people owe money, and so they're avoiding paying the state money that's owed, but certainly we recognize that insurance may be a factor for other individuals.
Okay, thank you.
Just to follow up to that, I want to understand better the 5% figure. So that is exactly how is that calculated?
So we calculate it based on the number of registered vehicles, and then we take the number of cases that are created where an ultimate payment is paid. Payment is made to us, which
cases are created.
Cases created means that we get a lapse of insurance, and at the end of the day, you wind up paying that lapse as opposed to us getting updated information to say you actually had insurance. So we don't want to look at all the cases created, because in those that you actually had coverage, it was just a mismatch in information. So what we do is compare those figures.
Just go back to cases created again. Walk us through what that means.
Sure. So insurance companies send us that book of business on a weekly basis. So everybody that's insured in Maryland is sent to us. We match that to the vehicles. There's a vehicle where we don't have insurance for one of the companies throughout the state. That goes in kind of a holding pattern for a period of days to see if additional information comes in.
And that is a created case?
That's right. And we run it against the real-time system to make sure we're not able to verify it that way, because we don't want to inconvenience the customer if the company didn't send us the required information. And then ultimately the customer will get an email followed by a letter letting them know that they do have a case with the MVA.
And that is when you issue an FR-19?
So FR-19s are submitted by the insurance companies to prove that a customer had insurance. They really have almost going away. I'd love to see them go away completely because of the electronic systems. They just need to electronically tell us that the customer had insurance.
So that is a dinosaur now, the FR-19. Okay, so it's 5% of registered vehicles in Maryland, roughly.
Right. And I can get you the exact rates, and we have it over the last several years. It's something that we have consistently tracked.
It'd be great if you could send that to us.
Happy to send that to you.
Big picture, you're saying 5% of the vehicles registered in Maryland do not have insurance at any given time, and that number has remained relatively stable since before the electronic system to using the electronic system?
Yeah, the percentages have remained very consistent. Again, that does not count any vehicle that's driving in Maryland without a state tags, which we know the number of those vehicles have also gone up during the same time. So part of what we might be experiencing is the fact that, we've got this increase in out-of-state tags driving on Maryland roads.
Right, okay. That number is actually lower than I thought it was, 5%. I'd always heard 10 to 15%, but maybe that's incorporating.
It's a different way of calculating what that rate is, and so there are other crashes that are included in that. So crashes that might be only property damage, right? That doesn't get reported to us, or there's other factors considered as part of those higher rates. We've always been consistent in the way we calculate it, so that way at least we know that we're comparing apples to apples in terms of the rate.
Well, it's good to know that it is remained stable, given the increased costs, at least this portion of it. Thank you for that. That was also a question I had, Delegate Harrison, so thanks for asking it. The other, I wanted you to go back to the Orioles. Can you explain again what we're doing with the Orioles?
Sure. So we have mobile driver's license on your phone in your electronic wallet, whether that's a Samsung, Google, or Apple. And so the Orioles, in partnership with us, now accept that if you choose to do age verification for a beverage purchase.
And can you explain to the people watching how they get a mobile driver's license?
Sure. It's just very simple, but we do have videos on our website. So if you want to go and watch the YouTube video first, just to see what you're going to do. But if you go to at mba.maryland.gov, but if you go to your phone and your electronic wallet, there's a driver's license button there, and it will drop down and it shows you the states that are participating. Obviously, you'll select Maryland. You need to have that physical card with you because you're going to take a picture of the front and back of it. You need to have pretty good lighting because you're going to take a selfie. You're going to have to do some motion to make sure that it's actually you there and it's not just a photo of you. And you'll go through a verification process. At the end of it, we'll tell you either it's been verified or we need a little bit more information because obviously we want it to be a really secure process. We've got a team on the back end at MBA that if it needs that additional verification, we can work with you on it. And over 3,000 people have already done it. We continue to have new partnerships there and even working with other state and local agencies. So more things will be announced soon. There are a lot of folks who are interested in the additional security it adds. Certainly convenience everybody's aware of. Many people use credit cards in their electronic wallets, but the security of only sharing information you need, like the age verification, they don't need to even know your exact date of birth. They need to know that you are able to consume that purchase that you're trying to make over 21 in the example of alcohol. That's all they know.
So if someone were to lose their physical license, does the mobile license, would it be acceptable if they were stopped on a traffic stop, for example?
So the great thing, if they lost their physical license, is that what you're talking about?
But they had their phone and they had their...
Right. We have heard it's been presented. We're still working at law enforcement how that works exactly. As you can imagine, having another physical device that they have to interact with is a challenge. And so trying to figure out how that works with the existing software and hardware that they have in the vehicle. But Merriweather Post Pavilion is another first, big concert venue that's now accepting. Like I said, at our branch offices, we're accepting it as well. And TSA PreCheck has been a partner for some time now.
Great. That's really good progress. Last but not least, you have a deficiency appropriation. Can you explain that to us?
Yeah, so the biggest part of that is that credit card fee. So the way that banking services work, it's that percentage of transactions. So obviously with that fee increase and most people using credit cards to complete their registration renewals, as well as other transactions at the MBA, that is the biggest piece we're seeing.
I know that you wrote that, I mean, you wrote that in your response, $800,000. It's amazing that the credit card receipts went from $491 to $631 million in a year. That's remarkable, but maybe it goes to some of the affordability issues that we're having. Any other part of that you wanted to discuss?
Sure. So the security piece of it, we use Maryland State Police at our branch offices. We pay them overtime. As their costs go up, we pay them what their salaries are. All of that's been established by DLS. So postage is going up, costs of materials. So as we talked about the 1 year, it's great for customers, but that's material that we then have to pay for additional year stickers that would normally be a 2-year sticker as opposed to 1.
Okay, we appreciate that, and you're factoring those results into this year's budget.
Futures budget.
Right, that's what we'd like to see. So we see fewer deficiency appropriations in the future, but we appreciate the explanation, and actually, your explanation was very good in the report. So we appreciate that. Do we have any other questions? I will tell you that on Monday, a week from today, MDOT will be first, because I know that you were last today, but you will be first with SHA and MDTA.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And that should wrap up your budget hearings.
That will.
Yeah. So we'll put you first, and somebody remind me if I forget. But we thank you for being here. I know it's been a long afternoon. We appreciate all of you and all the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Committee members, we have a vote. So if you can just hang on 1 second. Okay. Okay. Members, we are voting on House Bill 437. This requires Maryland to evaluate and offset the climate impacts of major highway expansion projects by pairing them